Goshing worked fast. By the next morning, he brought over Matchmaker Wong from Wong family village. She was a sharp-tongued woman in her 40s who knew everyone's business. The moment she stepped through our new compound gates, I could see her eyes going wide, sizing up everything. The high walls, the servants, my wives. Her mental abacus was already clicking away. She greeted me with a flood of flattery about me being a war hero, but I just nodded and got straight to the point, my father's situation. She said she already knew about the widow, Sister Lu, and had even sent word ahead. Lu was willing to meet my old man to see if they clicked. I sent someone to fetch my father. He'd been hiding in the back courtyard, chain-smoking, a pile of ash at his feet. The man was more nervous than he'd ever been in his life. When he finally shuffled out, his face was beet red, and he couldn't look anyone in the eye. Matchmaker Wong laid it on thick, telling him how lucky he was, how Sister Lu didn't care about money or status, just wanted a steady, decent man to share her days with. My father stammered something about being too old for all this, but the matchmaker shut that down fast. Watching him squirm like that, I felt amused but also a little sad. He'd had such a hard life. I put 2 taels of silver on the table as a deposit and told her to arrange the meeting. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head at the money. She promised to set everything up for the day after tomorrow at her place. When my father heard it was that soon, his pipe hand started shaking. He wanted to protest, but one look from me, and he kept quiet. My wives teased him gently. Wanru told him not to be nervous. Mingyong laughed and said he'd clean up nicely. He turned even redder, stomped his foot, and retreated to the back courtyard to smoke some more. Everyone had a good laugh. Then the mood shifted. Sun E rushed in looking tense and said 2 men from the county office were outside asking for me. The matchmaker froze. Everyone got nervous, wondering if Advisor Chen was already making a move. I stayed calm and told them to let the men in. 2 bailiffs entered, but they weren't arrogant like Zhang San's crew. They were polite, surprisingly polite. The lead one bowed and called me Mr. Sunday. That stunned everyone. My father poked his head out from the back, then ducked right back in. The matchmaker didn't dare breathe. Since when did government men call a village boy Mr.? I confirmed who I was, and the bailiff presented a heavy package on behalf of County Magistrate Zhou. He explained that the magistrate had used the rare incense I'd given him, felt much better, and wanted to invite me to the county office tomorrow for a personal chat. He opened the package, 10 fresh ingots of official silver, a full 100 taels, plus 2 bolts of fine silk. Everyone went speechless. The matchmaker stared at the silver, then at me, mouth hanging open. I kept my expression the same as always, but even I was a little surprised at how fast Zhou Wenhai had moved and how respectfully he was treating me. Matchmaker Wong had been doing her job for decades, but watching government men call a village boy Mr. and hand over 100 taels of silver completely broke her brain. She scrambled over to me, her smile 10 times brighter than before, swearing she'd make my father's match the most spectacular thing the region had ever seen. She wasn't just doing a job anymore. She was trying to latch onto our family. I didn't care about her sudden enthusiasm. I just told Wanru to put the gifts away and told my father to stop worrying and focus on his meeting the day after tomorrow. He nodded hard, standing a little straighter this time. If his son could make the county magistrate send gifts to his door, what was there to be scared about at a simple date? The next morning, I took Goshing and rode old Lizok's cart toward the county seat. Word had already spread. Every villager we passed on the road stopped and greeted me respectfully, eyes full of awe. Goshing sat up on the cart, puffing out his chest like it was his own wedding day. At the magistrate's residence, the head servant was already waiting at the gate. He led us through gardens and pavilions to a quiet study deep inside the compound. The moment I stepped in, I smelled the familiar scent of my 7 stars incense burning. Magistrate Zhou Wenhai was sitting behind his desk, a middle-aged man, pale-faced but with an unmistakable air of authority. He stood up when I entered and studied me carefully. I could tell he was impressed that I showed no fear. I greeted him properly, but without groveling. He got straight to the point. The incense I'd sent had actually eased his long-standing illness. Then he opened up. Years ago, while stationed at the northern border, he'd been poisoned by some kind of deep cold toxin. No doctor had ever cured it. On rainy days, or when he was exhausted, the pain in his chest felt like 1,000 needles. He couldn't sleep through it. He was being honest with me, but he was also testing me, wanting to see how much I really knew. Goshing was sweating bullets behind me. This was the county magistrate talking about his private illness. One wrong word could cost us our heads. But I stayed calm. The knowledge from the 100 Herbs Encyclopedia in my mind lit up instantly with everything about cold toxin conditions. I didn't rush to claim I could cure him, though. I told him plainly that I wasn't a proper doctor and didn't know formal medical techniques. That surprised everyone in the room. They'd expected me to boast. But my honesty actually made Zhou think more highly of me. I explained that I'd grown up in the mountains and learned some herb knowledge from an old herbalist. I said his symptoms matched something called cold evil body invasion that I'd read about in an old, damaged text. Then I described the condition in detail, how extreme cold energy invades the organs, binds with the blood, lies dormant until the body weakens, then erupts with unbearable pain. Over time, it drains a person's life force and shortens their lifespan. With every word I spoke, Zhou's face grew more serious. Everything I described matched exactly what he'd been experiencing, especially the part about life force draining away. He'd felt himself getting weaker year after year. That was why he'd become so obsessed with health remedies. He asked me if there was a cure. I told him there was, but it wouldn't be easy. The cold evil had been rooted in his body for too long. I'd need a powerful, yang-natured spirit herb as the main ingredient, plus 49 supporting medicines to make a special pill. The pill would attack the cold evil and force it out of his body, but the process would be like a battle fought inside him. The pain would be 100 times worse than his usual flare-ups, and there was serious risk of death. The room went dead silent. The servants turned white. Zhou broke into a cold sweat. Then I stood up and offered him the safer choice. The incense could keep him stable for another 10 years, even if it couldn't cure him. I bowed and turned to leave. I was giving him the choice. Retreat to advance. Just as I was about to walk out the door, Zhou called out to stop me. His chest was heaving, fists clenched. I could see the fear and the struggle in his eyes, but underneath it all, there was a fierce determination. 10 safe years followed by a slow, painful death, or risk everything for a real chance at being whole again. I stopped and turned around. He let out a long breath, as if it took every ounce of his strength, and said word by word, "I'm willing to try." Zhou Wenhai's words hung heavy in the room. His servants wanted to talk him out of it, but one look at the fire in his eyes, and they kept their mouths shut. They knew how much he'd suffered all these years. He'd finally found a lifeline and wasn't letting go, even if it was covered in thorns. I walked back to the desk, keeping my face serious. No gloating. I warned him one more time that once we started, there was no turning back, and even with my confidence, nothing was guaranteed. He cut me off. His mind was made up. Life and death were in heaven's hands. He'd rather gamble big than spend 10 more years rotting away in pain. Then he looked at me with complete trust, not testing me anymore, and told me whatever I needed. The entire county's resources were mine. Money, manpower, all of it. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. This wasn't just a doctor-patient deal anymore. He was staking his life and his whole office on me. I told him the 48 supporting herbs could be gathered through shopkeeper Qian at Rena Hall. The man had good connections. But the real problem was the main ingredient, blazing sungrass. I described it from the 100 Herbs Encyclopedia in my head. A supremely yang-natured spirit herb that only grows on sun-facing volcanic rock walls, takes 100 years to form, glows red like fire, and is nearly impossible to approach, let alone pick. Zhou had never heard of it. Neither had anyone in the room. I threw the problem back to him on purpose. If I made this seem easy, a man like Zhou would never fully believe in my abilities. The harder the cure, the more serious he'd take his condition, and the more extraordinary he'd consider me. He didn't hesitate for a second. He called his steward and ordered every bailiff and constable in the county to drop their non-urgent work. He sent word to every pharmacy, merchant, village chief, and headman, "Find this herb. 100 taels reward just for a lead. 1,000 taels for anyone who could actually bring it in." Even Goshing almost jumped out of his skin at that number. 1,000 taels could buy a mansion in the county seat. The whole residence erupted into action. After that, I wrote out the list of 48 herbs with their required ages, each name in neat handwriting. Zhou noticed that too, another point in my favor. Then I gave him one more instruction. Every day at noon, strip to the waist and sit in the strongest sunlight in his courtyard for 1 hour to absorb yang energy. It would prepare his body for what was coming. He memorized every word. When I got up to leave, he offered to have his steward escort me. I declined. He walked me to the study door himself and watched us go. I could feel his complicated gaze on my back, but his determination was only growing stronger. Once we were outside, Goshing was still wobbling on shaky legs, barely believing any of it had happened. He stammered and asked if I could really cure the magistrate. I just smiled and didn't answer. Of course I could. The 100 Herbs Encyclopedia gave me all the confidence I needed. But curing his illness was just the means. The real goal was to tie Zhou Wenhai to me completely. Advisor Chen thought he was the magistrate's favorite. I'd show him who the magistrate truly couldn't live without. On the ride home, the villagers along the road looked at us with something beyond respect now. It was closer to worship. I'd walked into the county magistrate's residence and walked out just fine. The Sun family was really rising. Back at the gate, Matchmaker Wong was waiting anxiously. She rushed over the moment she saw me, telling me everything was set. Sister Lu was very happy with my father, and the meeting was arranged for tomorrow morning at her place. I agreed and had Wanru give the matchmaker another 2 taels for her trouble. She waved her hands and said she couldn't possibly accept, but her fingers grabbed those coins quick enough. She promised everything would be perfect. After she left, I found my father pacing nervously in the courtyard, wringing his hands. I patted his shoulder and told him to relax. Everything was arranged. The way things stood now, nobody in the entire county would dare disrespect our family. I meant every word. With the magistrate's commitment, his life literally in my hands, I had all the leverage I needed. My father looked at my face, and I could see the tension he'd carried for half a lifetime finally drain away. His son was now the county magistrate's honored guest. What was there left to worry about? Magistrate Zhou's bounty notice set the whole county on fire. 1,000 taels for 1 herb. People went crazy. Bailiffs posted notices everywhere. Shopkeepers and farmers and hunters all rushed into the mountains chasing their fortune. 3 days passed with nothing. People kept bringing random red weeds to the county office, hoping to fool their way to a reward, but they all got thrown out. Everyone started to realize this blazing sun grass wasn't ordinary, and that money wasn't going to be easy. Meanwhile, Zhou followed my instructions to the letter. Every noon he sat shirtless under the blazing sun, soaking up yang energy. At first he hated the heat, but after a few days he actually felt the cold inside him weakening. His spirits lifted. His faith in me grew. Then came the breakthrough. An old hunter from Black Wind Mountain, a wild, dangerous place 30 miles south of the city, reported seeing a fiery red plant growing on a cliff face, exactly matching the drawing on the wanted poster. The catch: a massive black bear had its den right below that cliff. Zhou didn't hesitate. He ordered horses, assembled 20 of his best armed constables, and sent for me. When I arrived at the magistrate's residence, everyone was geared up and ready. Zhou had changed into rugged traveling clothes. We rode hard for Black Wind Mountain. The old hunter met us at the base and led the way in. The mountain lived up to its reputation, towering ancient trees blocking out the sky, thick rotting leaves on the ground, damp air that smelled of decay. After over an hour of hiking, even the trained constables were panting. I kept my breathing steady and my pace even, which I noticed Zhou quietly observing with approval. The hunter pointed us to the cliff ahead and warned us about the bear in a whisper. We crept forward past some boulders, and there it was, a sheer rock wall dozens of yards high, dark brown like scorched earth. Right in the middle, in a sun-facing crack, a single plant blazed with red light. About a foot tall, its leaves looked like actual flames under the sunlight. Blazing sungrass. My breath caught for a moment. Its quality was even better than the illustrations in the 100 Herbs Encyclopedia. This specimen had serious age to it. Everyone stood there stunned. Then a roar shook the ground. A huge black bear rose up on its hind legs at the base of the cliff, pounding its chest, glaring at us with eyes like copper bells. The constables instantly drew their bows. I snapped at them to hold their fire. Arrows would just bounce off that thick hide and make it angrier. Zhou backed me up and ordered everyone to freeze. The bear roared a while longer, asserting its territory. When nobody moved, it settled back down but kept watching us with wary eyes. Zhou looked at me, brow knotted, clearly stumped. The cliff was nearly vertical with no footholds, and a monster was guarding the base. Getting that herb seemed impossible. I'd already been calculating. I told everyone to pull back 50 paces and stay silent. Once they cleared out, I took a deep breath and let the strength flow through my body. I picked up a pebble and flicked it right at the bear's nose. That did it. The bear exploded with rage and charged straight at me, shaking the ground as it came. I heard Joe and the others screaming for me to watch out. I ran toward it instead. At the last second before it reached me, I ducked low, slid right under its belly, and drove a sharp wooden spike into its backside as I passed. The bear howled and spun after me. I didn't fight it. I just ran, leading it deeper into the forest. The two of us disappeared into the trees, me sprinting, the bear crashing through everything behind me. The others stood there in shock, listening to roars and snapping timber echo through the woods, hearts in their throats. About 15 minutes later, I walked back out of the forest. My clothes were a bit messy, my breathing slightly fast, but not a scratch on me. The bear was gone. I told Joe I'd lured it into a valley on the other side of the mountain. It wouldn't be coming back anytime soon. I asked for rope. The constables tied one end to a big tree up top, and I grabbed hold and scaled that cliff face like a monkey. Fast, no hesitation. When I reached the blazing sungrass, I used a jade trowel to carefully dig out the whole plant with its roots and soil intact, wrapped it in damp cloth, and tucked it inside my shirt. I slid back down the rope and landed lightly on the ground. When I placed that warm, glowing herb in Zhou Wenhai's hands, the way he looked at me had completely changed. It wasn't just trust anymore. It was reverence. Back at the county office, it was already dark. Zhou brought me to a sealed room deep inside his residence, his private meditation chamber that nobody else was allowed to enter. Everything was set up the way I'd asked. A waist-high bronze furnace with smokeless silver charcoal burning underneath, and all 49 herbs laid out in jade boxes, courtesy of shopkeeper Qian's hard work. The room smelled of a strange mix of medicines. I told Zhou that once I started, nobody could come near this room. He immediately ordered his steward to guard the entrance. Anyone who tried to break in would be killed on the spot. Just the two of us remained inside. I had Zhou sit cross-legged on a cushion, close his eyes, and keep his mind steady no matter what happened. Then I went to the furnace. I pressed my palm against the outer wall to feel the temperature. Every step of refining the 9-yang snow-melting pill was crystal clear in my head from the 100 Herbs Encyclopedia. I started feeding in the 49 supporting herbs one by one in exact order, carefully controlling the heat so each ingredient released its properties at precisely the right moment. Sweat beaded on my forehead almost immediately. The concentration this demanded was brutal. Zhou could smell the shifting fragrances even with his eyes closed, and I could tell his blood and energy were stirring. He clenched down hard to keep himself centered. When all 49 herbs had fused into a rolling green liquid at the bottom of the furnace, the critical moment arrived. I took a deep breath, unwrapped the blazing sungrass, and dropped it in whole. The green liquid erupted into a boil. Scorching heat blasted through the furnace seams, and the whole room's temperature shot up. Inside the furnace, it sounded like ice and fire were at war. Hissing, cracking, colliding. The red energy from the grass and the green liquid tangled and merged under my control, bit by bit. Minutes crawled by. My face went pale, my clothes soaked through with sweat. Then suddenly, silence. A wonderful fragrance drifted from the furnace vent. I nearly collapsed from exhaustion, but forced myself to stay upright. I opened the furnace. 9 pills sat at the bottom, each the size of a longan fruit, deep red, with a faint shimmer moving across their surfaces. 9 yang snow-melting pills. Done. I placed one on a jade plate and handed it to Zhou. He swallowed it without a second's hesitation. The moment that pill hit his stomach, it was like a bomb of fire went off inside him. He screamed. His skin turned bright red, veins bulging everywhere. It looked like his body might burst apart. The cold evil inside him felt the threat and fought back with everything it had. Hot and cold, two forces clashing violently inside one man. The pain was 1,000 times worse than anything he'd suffered before. I shouted at him to hold on, to keep his mind together. He bit down so hard his gums bled, clinging to the last shred of clarity he had. Several times he looked ready to break. Right at the worst moment, I stepped forward and struck several pressure points on his chest with 2 fingers, fast as lightning. Zhou's mouth flew open, and he spewed out a huge mouthful of black blood. That blood hit the floor and instantly froze into a thin layer of frost, giving off a foul, icy stench. With that poison expelled, the cold evil that had tortured him for over a decade was ripped out at the root. Gone. He collapsed on the cushion, completely drained, but I could see it on his face, a lightness he hadn't felt in years. His body was warm, his breathing smooth, every pore open and relaxed. He knew he'd survived. More than survived, he'd been reborn. He opened his eyes, looked at me standing there equally pale and drenched in sweat, and tried to get up to bow. I stopped him. We'd been through life and death together now, I said. No need for formalities. I handed him a jade bottle with the remaining 8 pills and told him to take one every 7 days. After 49 days, the cold evil would be completely gone, and he'd be stronger than he was as a young man. He held that bottle like it was the most precious thing in the world. Then he looked at me and made his promise. From this day forward, I was his brother. As long as he was magistrate of this county, nobody would dare touch my family. Whatever I needed, I just had to ask. That was exactly what I'd been waiting for. I smiled and helped him to his feet. I told him my family couldn't stay in the village forever. I wanted a proper place in the county seat. He waved his hand like it was nothing. He had an idle estate on the east side of town, 3 courtyards deep with a big garden, his own private property. He'd have the deed delivered to my house tomorrow. A gift, he said, from an elder brother to a younger one. Early the next morning, my wives were up before dawn getting my father ready. Wanru and Mainyang pulled out his best clothes, dusted and pressed them, heated water, and made him wash up properly. He sat on the stone bench in the yard like a puppet, letting them do whatever they wanted with him. Wanru carefully shaved his face with a fresh razor. Mainyang combed his graying hair neat, while teasing him about what a fine-looking old man he was underneath all the scruff. His face turned deep red. He muttered something about being too old for all this fuss, but he didn't move an inch to stop them. I came out and told him it was a good thing. He deserved it. He'd suffered enough in his life. It was time for some happiness. Matchmaker Wong showed up at the gate dressed in her own best outfit, powdered face, looking festive. The second she saw my cleaned-up father, she let out a dramatic gasp and declared Sister Lu would lose her mind over him. That made his face go even redder. I patted his shoulder and told them to get going. I didn't follow. This was something he needed to do on his own. My job was just to pave the road for him. I stood at the gate and watched him walk away with the matchmaker. His back was straight, no longer hunched over the way it used to be. That was enough for me. At Matchmaker Wong's house, things were simple but proper. A clean little room with an 8 immortals table, some melon seeds, peanuts, and hot tea. The widow, Lu Daqiao, was already there waiting, wearing a neat indigo cotton outfit with her hair combed tidy. She was nervous too, fidgeting with a handkerchief, glancing toward the door every few seconds. She'd been alone for years, raising her son by herself through all kinds of hardship. Now that her boy was grown and settled, she'd done her duty, but the loneliness at night ate at her. When Wong first brought up the idea, she'd refused. Too old for that nonsense, she thought. But Wong talked up our family so much, especially me, that Lu started to reconsider. She didn't want money or status. She just wanted a steady, honest man to spend her remaining years with. When she heard my father was known as the most honest man around, hardworking but unlucky in life, she felt a connection. They'd both had it rough. When my father walked in behind the matchmaker, Lu peeked at him quietly. He wasn't tall, but his back was straight, his clothes were clean, and his eyes were bright and honest. She relaxed a little. He looked like exactly the kind of man she'd hoped for. My father saw her too, a woman with a few wrinkles but a kind, gentle face. The type you could tell right away knew how to run a household. His nerves settled. Wong pushed them to sit down across from each other and started working her magic, introducing them back and forth with her usual enthusiasm. At first neither of them would speak. Then my father remembered what I'd told him before he left, and he mustered up his courage. His voice was rough but sincere. He told her his name was Sun Dashin, that he was just a farmer with no special talents who'd had a hard life, and that he'd raised me as his only son. Now that I'd done well and life had improved, he didn't want to be a burden on me. He just wanted a companion, someone to talk to, someone to look after each other with, so the second half of his life could be a little more comfortable. Every word was plain and true, not a hint of pretending. Lu looked up at him and said she was the same. She didn't want riches. She just wanted stability, someone who'd add a layer of clothing when it got cold, someone who'd bring her a bowl of hot water when she was sick. They started talking, just simple everyday things, nothing fancy. But the awkwardness melted away and the conversation flowed naturally. Wong watched from the side, grinning ear to ear. She knew this was a done deal. She cleared her throat and pushed them over the finish line, told them they were a perfect match. No point waiting. She'd check their birth dates and pick a good day to make it official. My father and Lu looked at each other. There was shyness in both their eyes, but also quiet satisfaction. They both nodded. My father and Lu Daqiao agreed there was no need for a big wedding, just a family dinner, and it was settled. After she moved in, my old man walked around grinning all day, years of worry melting off his face. Daqiao was hard-working and kind, keeping the household running smoothly and taking special care of my pregnant wives. She fit right in. The thing on my mind was the Lu sisters, Lu Mei and Lu Lan. They'd been drinking the herbal medicine I prescribed for days. When I checked their pulses, the cold energy inside them was clearly fading. Their blood flow was stronger, and their faces had gone from sickly yellow to a healthy pink. The timing was right. That evening I went back to my room. They were sitting on the edge of the bed under the dim oil lamp, sewing little belly wraps and baby clothes for the children on the way. When I came in, they stood up and called me husband. They'd come a long way from being scared of me. Now it was respect and trust. I asked if they'd finished their medicine. They had. I sat down and checked their pulses one more time. The wound cold condition was fully healed in both of them. Lu Mei gathered her courage and asked if they were better now. I could read the hope in their eyes. Big sister Wanru had told them they needed to give me children to secure their place in the family. I pulled them both close and asked if they wanted children. They did. I blew out the lamp. This time was different from before. They were still shy and clumsy, but they weren't just enduring it anymore. They were willing and warm. That made me happy. Afterward, they fell asleep with contented smiles. Then the system notifications hit. Both Lu Mei and Lu Lan had successfully conceived. Family prosperity went up by 2 points. That meant 5 women now carrying my children: Wanru, Mainyang, Linger, Lu Mei, and Lu Lan. The Sun family was growing at an incredible pace. Then the system went wild. I'd hit a milestone, 5 heirs, and the rewards rolled in. First, the family retainer system upgraded. Once a servant's loyalty maxed out, they could unlock special abilities or inherit skills from me. Second, the shop system officially opened. Third, a milestone reward, a divine skill called Craftsman's Heart. A flood of knowledge poured into my brain. Architecture, mechanisms, forging, woodworking, every craft technique from the ancient world. How to pick materials, how to build the strongest structures, how to design hidden passages and traps, how to forge weapons sharp enough to cut through iron. All of it felt as natural as breathing. With this skill, my earlier plan to build a nice brick house was child's play. I could design and build an actual fortress with defensive fortifications if I wanted to. I opened the new shop. It had a clean interface split into categories: grain and supplies, weapons and equipment, daily goods, and blueprints and manuals. The supply section had everything from flour to rice to refined salt, all cheaper than market prices and available instantly. Basically, a portable warehouse. 100 pounds of flour cost 1 tael of silver. A pound of refined salt was 500 copper coins. The weapons section was impressive but expensive. A basic forged steel saber cost 50 taels. An armor-piercing horse-chopping blade was 500. I was still poor by those standards, but I wasn't discouraged. The shop was open now, and that meant a whole new path to getting stronger. The more I grew my family and its influence, the more my daily income would rise, and eventually I'd be able to afford everything in there. I pulled up my status panel. Physical strength at 15, triple a normal person. 5 heirs on the way. 3 skills: 100 herbs encyclopedia, gynecology master, and now craftsman's heart. 9 retainers with loyalty ranging from 80 to 100. And my daily income had climbed to 18 taels of silver. 18 taels a day. I'd never felt this good. The next morning at breakfast, my wives couldn't resist teasing the Lu sisters when they came out of the bedroom, walking a little stiffly. Mainyang was the worst, laughing behind her hand and asking if they'd had a hard night. The 2 girls turned bright red and wanted to disappear. Da Xiao rescued them by bringing out a big pot of meat porridge and telling everyone to sit down and eat. I looked around the table at all my women and felt deeply satisfied. 5 pregnant, plus Da Xiao taking care of the household. Things were coming together nicely. I cleared my throat and dropped the big news. We were moving to the county seat. Everyone froze. My father started protesting. We'd just finished the walls, just turned the soil. Wanru worried about money. Goshing scratched his head wondering why we'd leave the village. I told them all simply. Our children would be born in the city, go to school in the city. The village was too small for where this family was headed. Right on cue, a horse carriage pulled up outside. Magistrate Zhou's steward walked in with 2 servants carrying big red wooden chests. He opened them up. One held 500 taels of fresh silver, neatly stacked. The other was packed with expensive silk, fine cloth, and luxury health tonics. Everyone's jaws hit the floor. Even Mainyang, who'd seen some wealth in her life, covered her mouth in shock. Then the steward pulled out a property deed and handed it to me. A 3-courtyard mansion on the east side of the city, already cleaned and ready. Zhou called it a gift between brothers. I took the deed, nodded, and told him to pass along my thanks. After he left, the yard erupted. My father's legs went weak staring at that chest of silver. Wanru asked if we could really live in such a place. I put the deed in her hand and smiled. Of course we could. It was our home now. No more objections after that. Everyone was buzzing with excitement. There wasn't much to pack. Some clothes, pots and pans. I had Goshing hire a few ox carts from the village. When word got out that the Sun family was moving to the county seat today, the whole village came to watch. People crowded around our gate with complicated looks on their faces. Envy, jealousy, but mostly regret. The loafers I'd kicked out earlier were kicking themselves hardest. If they'd worked honestly, maybe they'd be heading to the city too. My uncle's son Lauer and his wife Wong hid behind their wall watching chests of silver and silk get loaded onto carts. Wong pinched her husband hard, hissing about what a useless man he was. If they'd stayed on good terms with us, they'd be getting a share of all this. He just sat there smoking with his head down, saying nothing. Before leaving, I pulled Goshing and Dezhuang aside. Goshing was quick-witted, so I made him my personal steward. He'd come with me to the city. Dezhuang was steady and reliable, so I put him in charge of all the farmland back in the village, with son Yi and the others under him to guard the family's roots here. I gave them each 20 taels for expenses. I helped my father and Da Xiao onto the widest cart, loaded up my wives, and our little caravan rolled out of the village under the complicated stares of everyone who'd known us our whole lives. Our new home was on Greenstone Lane in the east side of the city, the wealthy neighborhood. The mansion sat at the very end of the lane, red lacquered gates flanked by 2 stone lions, high walls separating us from the world. The steward and servants were already waiting. We walked through the front gate, and every single one of us from the countryside just stopped and stared. A wide stone-paved front courtyard, spotless. Through the hanging flower gate, a beautiful garden with rockeries, ponds, pavilions, winding paths, and rare flowers everywhere. Beyond that, 3 rows of grand brick buildings with carved beams and painted pillars, 20 or 30 rooms total. Our whole family could live here with space for dozens more. I held my father's arm and told him this was our home now. His lips trembled and he couldn't speak, just kept nodding, tears welling up in his eyes. My wives were stunned and overjoyed. None of them had ever imagined living in a place like this. It was like something out of a storybook. Settling into the new mansion was easy. Zhou's people had left it spotless with all the furniture and bedding already in place. We basically just walked in and started living. I gave my father and Da Xiao the main rooms in the back courtyard, connected to a little vegetable garden they both loved. My wives each picked their own sunny rooms in the east wing. The place was so big that having everyone spread out actually made it feel a bit empty. That first night, my father couldn't sleep. He asked Da Xiao to pinch him because he thought he was dreaming. She laughed and told him to go to sleep. This was real life now. The next morning, I called Goshing and told him we had business. His eyes lit up and he straightened his back in the new blue robe I'd given him, ready to charge into battle. I told him to calm down. We were just going to the servant market to hire some help. The market was on the west side of town. Dozens of men, women, and children stood in rows with straw markers on them, waiting to be picked like goods on a shelf. The manager, a man in a silk shirt with a wispy beard, rushed over to greet us, asking what we were looking for: cooks, maids, laborers. I spotted a row of strong-looking young men and asked the price. 8 taels each, the manager said. Refugees from up north, sturdy and hardworking. Before I could have Goshing take a closer look, a sneering voice cut in. A young man in fancy silk robes with a jade pendant and a folding fan strolled up with 2 thugs behind him. He called us mud-legged peasants who didn't belong in a place like this. Then he pointed at the exact same men I'd been looking at and announced he was taking them all. Goshing's face went red, and he stepped forward to argue. We were here first. The rich kid just laughed, waving his fan at us, asking if a country bumpkin like me could even afford servants. His thugs laughed along. The manager sweated nervously, caught between us. The kid turned out to be a young master from the Wong family, big grain merchants with connections to the county deputy, used to pushing people around. I stayed quiet through all of it. Then I patted Goshing's shoulder to step back, walked to the counter, pulled out 2 ingots of official silver, 100 taels, and slammed them on the table. Those men, plus those sharp-looking girls over there. I'll take them all. The whole place went silent. That was serious money. The Wong kid's laughter died in his throat. Even for a rich family's son, dropping 100 taels on servants in one go was painful. The manager's eyes went wide, and he bent practically in half, scrambling to process the deal. The Wong kid's face turned purple. He threatened the manager. Did he really want to offend the Wong family over some nobody? The manager hesitated. So I pulled out one more thing and set it on the table. A waist badge from the county magistrate's office. Zhou Wenhai had given it to me along with the mansion for convenience getting around town. The moment the manager and the Wong kid saw that badge, their legs turned to jelly. The kid's face drained white. He couldn't get a single word out. The county magistrate's personal token, meaning I was the magistrate's honored guest. I said one word. Go. The kid practically fell over himself, scrambling out the door with his thugs, leaving his dropped fan on the ground. The manager couldn't bow low enough after that. He personally handled everything. 8 male servants and 6 female servants, all with their contracts, at the lowest possible price. I marched the whole group back to our new home. Goshing walked behind me looking at my back with pure admiration. In the front courtyard, I lined everyone up and laid it out simply. Your son family people now. Work loyally and I guarantee you'll eat well, dress warm, and be treated fairly. Then I set up the chain of command. Goshing was head steward. All male servants reported to him. Suehua handled the kitchen and shopping. Chuntao managed the inner quarters and all the female servants. The 3 of them stepped forward, faces glowing with pride. Just like that, a proper household system was in place. The mansion finally felt alive with people moving around and getting to work. I stood under the covered walkway watching it all come together, but my mind was already on the next thing. The framework was built, but the house needed a proper mistress running it day to day. Wanru was the steadiest and most dignified of my wives. Once she had her baby, I'd hand her the household keys and authority. As for me, I couldn't stay home forever. There was more to do out there. That night, the big mansion was finally quiet, but I couldn't sleep. The excitement of moving day had faded, and reality set in. This household was expensive. 8 new male servants, 6 female servants, plus Goshing and the original staff. Feeding everyone 3 meals a day alone was a real cost. Then there was clothing, supplies, maintenance, everything. Zhou's 500 taels looked generous, but sitting around spending without earning would drain it eventually. The system's daily salary was steady, but my ambition went far beyond just being a comfortable rich man. I wanted to build a family legacy that would last 100 years. That took serious, ongoing money. I needed a business, something that would keep generating wealth on its own. I pulled up the system shop in my mind and started browsing the categories. Weapons and equipment. Tempting stuff like forged steel sabers and armor-piercing swords. But owning those privately in this era could get your entire family executed. Not worth the risk when life was finally getting good. Grain and supplies. Cheaper than market price by about 30%. But the profit margin was too thin for real wealth, and I'd immediately clash with the established grain merchants. No point making enemies right out of the gate. Then I opened daily goods, and my eyes lit up. Snowflower soap, made with natural plant essences, rich lather, pleasant scent. Cost, 100 copper coins per bar. In this era, wealthy people used rough soap pods that smelled awful and barely cleaned anything. This stuff would blow their minds. Crystal mirror, smooth as water, showing every detail, 100 times clearer than any bronze mirror. Cost, 200 copper coins each. Every bronze mirror in this world showed a blurry, yellowish reflection. A mirror where women could see their own pores. They'd pay 10 taels of silver without blinking. 100 flower perfume, 1 drop, and the scent lasts 3 days, far better than any sachet. 500 copper coins a bottle. Ivory bone combs, peach blossom rouge. Each item was a potential sensation on its own, and the cost from the shop was practically nothing compared to what people would pay. The old saying rang true in any era. Women's money is the easiest to earn. A plan clicked together in my head. I wouldn't sell just one product. I'd open a comprehensive shop, something this world had never seen. A place that sold only novel, beautiful, high-quality goods, all targeted at women. A name floated up from deep memory. Something that captured brand recognition, innovation, quality, and variety all in one. I had it. With the system shop behind me, I essentially had a factory with near-zero costs and unlimited supply. All I needed to do was price things right and sell to the people who wanted them most. I could already picture silver flowing in like a river. The next morning I was up before dawn, feeling completely different from the day before. I sent a maid to fetch Goshing, and he came running over in his neat blue robe, standing at attention. I told him we were going out. He guessed we were heading back to the servant market. He thought the kitchen needed a dedicated firewood chopper. I laughed. Not buying people today. I told him we were going to East Main Street, the busiest commercial strip in the county, to look at shop spaces. His mouth dropped open. Then his face turned red with pure excitement. Opening a shop, running a business, being a shopkeeper, things he'd never dared dream about. He puffed out his chest and swore he'd find me the best storefront with the best feng shui in the whole street. I smiled, and the two of us walked out through the red gates into the morning light. East Main Street was the fanciest part of the county seat. Goshing trailed behind me, with his eyes practically falling out of his head. 2-story buildings with curved roofs, silk-dressed merchants, sedan chairs carrying officials' wives. He'd only ever dared hang around the poor West Market before. Now he was walking this street like he belonged. I stayed quiet, just observing. The shops looked impressive by local standards, but to me they were cluttered and outdated. My store would be something completely different. We walked into a real estate broker's office called Unju. The agent, a middle-aged man with a thin mustache, was dozing at his counter. He looked us over, decided we were poor, and nearly went back to sleep. When I knocked on the counter and said we wanted to buy a shop on East Main Street, he snapped awake fast. He took us to see several places. A former rice shop, 2 stories, decent location, 180 taels. Too narrow, bad lighting. I shook my head. A silk fabric store next to the Gold Jade Tower, 350 taels. Still not right. Too dark and closed off. I wanted something bright and open, the kind of space that lifts your mood the moment you step inside. Goshing was sweating behind me. 350 taels rejected without a blink. After a few more misses, the agent wiped his forehead and admitted there was one more option, but it came with problems. He pointed to the most prominent building on the entire street. A 2-story standalone pavilion on the corner of the main crossroads. Wider than 3 normal shops combined. Carved wooden windows running the whole 2nd floor, the best light and visibility anywhere. And it was sitting empty, sealed with official tape. It had been the biggest fabric store in the county until the owner crossed the wrong person and lost everything overnight. The county deputy had seized it and was holding out for 1,000 taels. His brother-in-law, that same Wong kid from the servant market, wanted it cheap, but the deputy wouldn't budge. Goshing nearly choked. 1,000 taels could build 10 brick houses back in the village. The agent smiled nervously and suggested we just admire it from a distance. Way above our level, he said. Right then, a fat man in shiny silk robes strolled out of the Gold Jade Tower across the street, rolling walnuts in his hand with 2 tough-looking men behind him. This was Qian Tong, the Gold Jade Tower shopkeeper. He spotted us staring at the sealed building and couldn't resist. He sneered at the agent for bringing mud-legged peasants around and told us we had no business even looking at that property. He said we were blocking his shop's good fortune just by standing there. His men cracked their knuckles. Goshing's blood rushed to his face, and he started to step forward, but the agent grabbed him, apologizing desperately. I didn't react to any of it. I just kept looking at that building. When the fat man finally ran out of insults, I turned to the agent. "I'll take this one." Everyone froze. Goshing, the agent, even the fat shopkeeper. Then Xiantong burst out laughing. 1,000 taels? He said selling me 10 times over wouldn't cover it. I ignored him and asked the agent if he was going to take me to the county deputy or if I should go myself. The agent stood there with sweat rolling down his face, unable to speak. I didn't wait. I straightened my robe and started walking toward the county office. Goshing snapped out of it and hurried after me. Goshing was practically shaking as we walked up the county office steps. He'd never been inside in his life. Normal people only ended up here when something bad happened. I patted his back and kept moving. The gate guards tried to stop us. I slipped one of them a bit of silver and told him to announce that Sun Yi from the east side wanted to see County Deputy Liu about the Duxingxiang shop. The guard looked me over, decided I wasn't ordinary despite the plain clothes, and went inside. He came back quickly and let us through. Deputy Liu and Study smelled of sandalwood. He was a pudgy, pale-faced man in his 40s sitting in a big armchair sipping tea, and also the uncle of that Wong kid from the servant market. He glanced at us, saw our simple clothing, and didn't even offer us a seat. I got straight to the point. I wanted to buy the Duxingxiang property on East Main Street. He set down his tea and acted like he was doing me a favor just talking to me. Lots of people wanted that shop, he said, including his dear nephew. But business was business. Whoever paid more got it. 1,000 taels. Not a coin less. Goshing's face went white. I didn't flinch. I just reached into my robe and placed something on his desk. Zhou Wenhai's personal wooden token, carved from fine boxwood with the character Zhou on it. Liu didn't notice at first. Then he read it. His hand jerked so hard that hot tea splashed everywhere, and he yelped in pain. But he forgot all about that. He stared at the token, and every drop of color drained from his face. That badge meant I was in the magistrate's inner circle. The county deputy was nothing compared to the county magistrate. If he offended Zhou's honored guest, he could lose his position by morning. His arrogance evaporated instantly. He started stammering, calling me Mr. Sun, apologizing for his rudeness, personally dragging over a chair, wiping it down for me. I sat, picked up a teacup, and blew on it casually, just like he'd been doing a minute ago. "Don't you think 1,000 taels is a bit steep?" I asked. He tripped over himself backtracking. "Too much. Way too much." I was talking nonsense. I asked what he thought was fair. His brain was spinning. Price it too high and he'd anger me. Too low and it'd hurt his wallet. He tried 900. I kept sipping tea silently. He gritted his teeth and dropped to 800, swearing that was the registered value on the books, and he couldn't go lower without the paperwork falling apart. I set down the cup. 800 works. He exhaled with relief. Then I told him I hadn't brought that much cash. I pulled out a heavy pouch, 500 taels from Zhou's gift, and put it on the table as a deposit. I proposed we sign the deed now, and I'd have my steward deliver the remaining 300 within a month. He stared at the silver, then at that token still sitting on his desk. Technically, handing over a deed before full payment wasn't proper, but saying no to someone carrying the magistrate's personal badge? The consequences of refusing were far worse than bending the rules. Of course, no problem at all. He was all smiles again, calling me his brother since I was the magistrate's brother. He could wait a month, 3 months, 5, whatever I needed. He called in a clerk, pulled out the deed paperwork, and we signed and sealed everything on the spot. I walked out with the deed in my hand. Liu bowed us all the way to the front gate, wiping cold sweat with his sleeve even after we turned the corner. On the walk home, Goshing was floating. He couldn't believe I'd just waved a token and turned a 1,000-tael shop into an 800-tael deal, with the county deputy groveling the whole time. I smiled, but my mind was already on the next problem. The shop was secured. The remaining 300 taels would come together within a month from my daily system income. But money wasn't the real challenge. My store would sell snow soap, crystal mirrors, 100-flower perfume, things that simply didn't exist in this world. I couldn't tell people I'd conjured them out of thin air. I needed a believable story for where these goods came from. That evening, the whole family sat together for our first proper dinner in the new house. The table was loaded with chicken, duck, fish, and meat. Suwa and the new cook had gone all out. My father and Da Xiao kept piling food on my plate, beaming with happiness. My wives were glowing too, savoring a life none of them had ever imagined. But my mind was somewhere else. The shop was secured, money wasn't a major issue, but I had a problem. Where were my products supposed to come from? Snow soap, crystal mirrors, flower perfume. None of these things existed in this world. I couldn't just put them on shelves and say a fairy delivered them. I needed a believable cover story. Making them myself wouldn't work. The technology couldn't be explained. Claiming I bought them from some foreign merchant was risky too. If anyone tried to track down this merchant, the lie would collapse. Then it hit me. I'd say I traveled to a distant, hard-to-reach place to source the goods personally. The journey was long and dangerous, so only I could make the trip. That would explain why the products were unique and why nobody else could copy them. In reality, I just needed to disappear for a while and come back with goods from the system shop. Genius. I put down my chopsticks and told everyone about my plan. I'd figured out what to sell at the shop, unique, high-quality goods that would make serious money. But I needed to go on a long trip to get the merchandise. Maybe 10 days, maybe a month. Da Xiao's face fell immediately. My father frowned. Wanru went quiet, just watching me with worried eyes. They all said the same thing. Life was good now, why take risks? I reassured them. I had connections, I knew what I was doing, and there was no danger. But this trip was necessary. Our household was big and expensive. We couldn't just spend without earning. Once the shop opened, it would be our own gold mine. We'd never have to depend on anyone again. That convinced them, even if they still worried. Da Xiao asked me to at least take people along for safety. I told her no. The fewer people who knew this trade route, the better. I'd be faster alone. I gave Goshing his orders for while I was gone. Hire the best craftsmen. Gut the entire shop interior, whitewash the walls, lay clean stone floors, make everything bright and open. I'd leave him detailed drawings before I went. He slapped his chest and swore the place would be the finest in the county by the time I got back. The next morning, the family gathered at the front gate to see me off. Da Xiao's eyes were red. She'd stuffed my bag with dried food and clean clothes. Wanru whispered to be careful. I nodded, climbed into a hired carriage, and rolled out of Greenstone Lane. Once outside the county walls, I started thinking about where to actually go. My original plan was simple: hide in some quiet inn in town for a few days and come back. But that was too risky. The county seat was small, the shop renovation would be noisy, and Goshing would be running around supervising every day. If he spotted me wandering around town, the whole story would fall apart. I needed to go somewhere far enough that I'd never run into anyone I knew. The prefecture capital, Nanyang City. It was 3 or 4 days away by carriage, riding hard. Perfect. The distance would make my sourcing trip completely believable. Plus, I've been curious about what a real city in this era looked like. If the Sun family was ever going to grow beyond a small county, we'd need to move into the prefecture eventually. This would be a scouting trip. And honestly, a big, exciting city, money in my pocket, nobody watching me? Why wouldn't I enjoy myself a little? I knocked on the carriage wall. Driver, change of plans. Head south. We're going to Nanyang. 3 days on the road, and the county was long gone. When the walls of Nanyang Prefecture City appeared on the horizon, I knew I'd arrived somewhere real. The city gate was over 30 feet high, with soldiers in actual iron armor, nothing like the county bailiffs back home. Streams of carriages and people flowed in and out. I paid the driver, sent him away, and walked in with just a pack on my back. The streets were wide enough for 4 or 5 carriages side by side. Shops were 3 and 4 stories tall with gilded signs. The people here dressed better than the richest folks in our little county. Compared to this place, the whole of Qingyuan County was basically a village. I had 2 goals: stay out of sight so my sourcing trip story held up, and study the market. My store would target wealthy people, especially women. But first I wanted to understand the men, specifically, how rich men spent their money at night. I tossed a few coins to a street vendor and asked him where the fanciest entertainment house in the city was. He grinned and pointed south, the Hall of Flowers, a 3-story pleasure house by the river. Top-tier girls, top-tier prices. Not for ordinary people. I found it easily. A huge building made of expensive Nanmu wood, covered in red lanterns, with fancy carriages parked out front and wealthy men streaming in and out. I showed up in plain clothes with a travel pack. Didn't exactly fit in. The doorman blocked me right away, politely suggesting I try the cheap taverns across the street. When I kept walking, they got more aggressive. Then the madam came out, a painted, plump older woman called Mama Xiang. She took one look at my clothes and told them to throw me out before I bothered the real customers. I didn't say a word. I just reached into my pack, pulled out a 50-tael ingot of shining official silver, and slammed it on the reception counter. Everyone froze. I told them I wanted their best private room, their finest wine and food, and their top girls to come play music. Then I asked if 50 taels was enough for a deposit. The madam's face flipped faster than a mass change in opera. She slapped the doorman who'd tried to stop me, made him kneel and apologize, then personally escorted me upstairs, bowing the whole way. She ordered the #1 room opened and sent for their star performer, a girl named Su Qing. The top room on the 3rd floor had a view of the river, foreign carpets on the floor, rosewood furniture, famous calligraphy on the walls, and expensive ambergris incense burning in the corner. 2 pretty attendants came in immediately, one pouring wine, one peeling lychees for me. Then Mama Xiang brought in Su Qing. She was about 17 or 18, wearing a simple white dress, no makeup, carrying a pipa. She was 100 times more beautiful than the painted women downstairs. She bowed quietly, sat down with her instrument, and said nothing. The madam bragged that Su Qing was their crown jewel. Most guests couldn't even get a meeting. I told her to leave the girl and get out. Alone with Su Qing, I asked her to play something. She asked what I wanted. I requested Spring River Flower Moon Night. The music flowed like water and moonlight, elegant and moving. When she finished, I clapped and tossed 5 taels on the table as a tip. She looked at the silver but didn't touch it. I sell my art, not my body, she said quietly. Did I ask you to? That's payment for the music. Take it. She accepted and sat back down when I asked her to stay and talk. Then I got to the real reason I was here. I asked who spent the most money at this place and how much they typically dropped. She told me about the big salt and iron merchant Zhang, the silk trader Zhao, and various government officials. They'd spend dozens or hundreds of taels per visit, sometimes throwing 1,000 at a girl they fancied. That told me what I needed to know. The wealthy people in this city had even more money than I'd expected. My snow soap and crystal mirrors could be priced high without any trouble finding buyers. My mood lifted. I drained my cup. This luxurious world was easy to get lost in, but it also fueled ambition. Looking at this graceful young woman across from me, I felt sure. Coming to the prefecture city was the right call. I poured myself another drink and asked her to play something more upbeat. The music stopped and Su Qing sat there like a painting, beautiful but lifeless. I drank more wine. It was good stuff, smooth and sweet, but something was missing. I'd come here to research the market and to relax. Su Qing played well and looked stunning, but she was too stiff, too formal, like a porcelain doll. I'm a man from a world where entertainment actually means fun. When I'm spending money to enjoy myself, I don't want to sit there performing some act of high culture appreciation. What's the point of that? I knocked on the table. Mama Xiang rushed in. I told her to send Su Qing away. Everyone was shocked. Most men would kill for extra time with the star performer. I'd heard one song and was done. The madam asked if something was wrong. I said the music was fine, but I wasn't in the mood for art anymore. I handed her 20 taels and told her to bring me someone different, someone warm, fun, who understood what a man actually wanted. Not talent, just good company. Su Qing's face flickered with surprise and a flash of humiliation. In her eyes, I'd just told the house's crown jewel she was boring. Mama Xiang was fuming inside, but the silver was heavy in her hand, so she swallowed it and promised to find exactly what I wanted. She shooed Su Qing out and went to fetch someone else. I poured myself another drink. I didn't feel bad about it. I'm a simple man. I came to a pleasure house for pleasure, not to pretend I was some refined scholar. She came back with a girl called Yunner, 15 or 16, wearing a peach-pink dress, lightly made up, with a shy, sweet look about her. Nothing like Su Qing's cold elegance. This one was real. Yunner was so nervous she could barely move. When she tried to pour wine, her hands shook and she spilled some. She dropped to her knees in terror, begging forgiveness. I caught her arm and told her to relax. No need for all that. She was clumsy and awkward, but I liked her 100 times more than the Ice Queen. At least she was genuine. Then I had an idea. Time to test my product on a real customer. I opened my pack and pretended to rummage through it while mentally opening the system shop. I redeemed 1 bar of snowflower soap, jasmine gardenia scent, for 100 copper coins. A small paper box appeared deep in my bag. I pulled it out and set it on the table. The packaging alone was something this world had never seen. Clean white paper with a single painted gardenia flower. Simple and elegant. Yunner peeked at it curiously. I pushed it toward her and told her it was a gift. She could barely believe it. Her trembling hands opened the box, and instantly the room filled with a fresh, rich fragrance unlike anything she'd ever smelled. Inside was a snow-white block carved with delicate patterns, smoother than the finest jade, whiter than silk. She was completely mesmerized. She asked if it was some kind of perfume paste. I told her it was called snowflower soap, for washing. Her jaw dropped. Something this precious, just for washing? All she'd ever used was rough, dark soap pods. I told her to keep it. She looked ready to cry with gratitude, clutching that bar of soap to her chest like it was the most valuable thing she'd ever owned. She took very good care of me that night. The next morning, the Real show happened without me even being there. In the shared washroom behind the Hall of Flowers, the other girls were dragging through their morning routine, complaining about slow business. Then Yunner walked in humming, practically glowing. The moment she unwrapped the soap and wet it, the gardenia scent flooded the room, drowning out the smell of their harsh soap pods. Every girl stopped what she was doing. They crowded around her, staring at the white bar, watching the rich, creamy lather form in her hands. They touched her skin afterward, impossibly smooth and fragrant. The room exploded with questions. What was that miracle thing? Where did she get it? Even the snobbish higher-ranked girls couldn't help pushing in for a look, eyes burning with envy. Yunner lifted her chin, basking in the attention, and told them proudly, it was a gift from last night's guest. He called it snowflower soap. I walked out of the Hall of Flowers the next morning feeling refreshed and satisfied. The night with Yunner had been pleasant, but more importantly, I'd watched a single bar of soap drive a room full of women crazy. Proof that in any era, women's money is the easiest to earn. I tipped the doorman and left. The pleasure house had served its purpose as market research. Now I needed a proper base, somewhere quiet to think and plan. Walking through the wide streets of Nanyang, it hit me clearly for the first time. This city was a massive gold mine. Shops everywhere, crowds flowing like rivers, carriages rolling nonstop. The energy here was completely different from sleepy little Qingyuan County. I found a clean, modest and called Lucky Fortune on a side street. Not too flashy, not too shabby. 3 stories, freshly oiled front, quiet. I paid 500 copper for 5 nights and settled into the top floor room. After washing up and changing, I headed out again. To really understand a city, you go to 2 places, the entertainment houses and the restaurants. I'd done the first. Time for the second. The innkeeper pointed me to Wangjiang Tower on the east side, 5 stories tall, the biggest and fanciest restaurant in the city. You could see the Luo River from the top floor. When I got there, a doorman tried to block me with the old, "We're fully booked" excuse. One look at my plain clothes, and he'd decided I didn't belong. I flashed a 50-tael silver ingot in front of his face and asked if they were still booked. A manager rushed over, smacked the doorman on the head, and personally escorted me to the best window seat on the 2nd floor. I ordered their signature dishes, steamed river base, braised lion's head meatballs, and a pot of their finest wine. Then I ate slowly and listened. That was the real reason I was here, eavesdropping on rich people. At the next table, 2 merchants were gossiping about how some wealthy man's son spent 1,000 taels on a single pearl hairpin for his new concubine. I filed that away. The jewelry market here was already crowded and competitive. Then I tuned into a more interesting conversation. A group of young rich kids, clearly sons of important families, were drinking and complaining. One surnamed Zhao was stressed about his fiancée's upcoming birthday. He had no idea what to gift her. His friends suggested silk since his family owned a fabric business. He slammed the table. She'd seen every fine fabric in existence. Nothing would impress her. What she wanted was something surprising, something unique, something nobody else had. The others agreed. Women's standards were getting higher. Regular gold and jade didn't excite them anymore. They all wanted rare, novel things. But where would you even find such things? Everything in Nanyang was the same old stuff. I sat there with my wine cup frozen in midair, listening to every word. These men were practically describing my customer base. Rich, eager to spend, desperate for something new and exclusive to make them look good. And what did I have in my system shop? Snow soap, crystal mirrors, flower perfume. Things that literally didn't exist anywhere in this world. My heart started pounding. A plan was already forming. I wasn't going to hawk my goods on the street like some peddler. That was beneath what I was building. I was going to make these people come to me, begging to buy. The first step was setting the bait. I finished my meal, paid the bill with a generous tip, and stood up casually. I strolled past the young Master Zhao's table at an unhurried pace, looking like I was just heading for the stairs. Right as I brushed past him, my hand in my robe loosened ever so slightly, as if by accident. A small paper box slipped from my robe and rolled right to young Master Zhao's feet. Perfectly timed. He picked it up, irritated at first, but the moment he held it, I could see his attitude shift. The clean white packaging with its single painted gardenia caught his eye. Then the scent hit him, that faint, unmistakable fragrance leaking through the seams. Nothing like anything he'd ever smelled before. He looked up and saw me heading for the stairs. "Wait, sir, hold on." He chased after me with the box. I turned around with just the right amount of surprise on my face, then acted relieved and flustered. Oh no, I'd almost lost it. My wife would have killed me. Thank you so much. My panicked act only made him more curious. He asked what was inside. I stammered and said it was just a little gift for my wife, nothing special. That was the magic word. A gift for a woman. His brain connected the dots instantly. This was exactly what he needed for his fiancée's birthday. He asked to buy it. I shook my head like a rattle drum. Absolutely not, I said. It wasn't about money. This thing was nearly impossible to find. I'd risked my life climbing mountains to get it, all just to keep my wife happy. If I sold it, she'd never forgive me. The harder I refused, the more desperate he got. He grabbed my sleeve begging me. I lowered my voice and played mysterious. I told him it was called snow flower soap, for washing face and body, leaves your skin fragrant all day. Then I casually mentioned I'd also found a crystal mirror that showed reflections with perfect clarity, an ivory bone comb, and a small bottle of 100-flower perfume made from the essence of 100 flowers. Each one absolutely unique in the world. Some of that was real, some I made up on the spot. The point was making the whole supply chain sound rare and legendary. Their eyes went wide. A mirror that shows every detail? Perfume from 100 flowers? Any woman would go insane for these things. Zhao grabbed my hand. 20 taels. He'd pay 20 taels just for the soap. Inside I was dancing. A bar of soap that cost me 100 copper coins, selling for 20 taels of silver. That profit margin was better than robbery. But on the outside, I put on my most pained, conflicted face. I sighed deeply like a man making the ultimate sacrifice. Fine, I said. Since he was clearly devoted to his woman, I'd painfully part with it. My wife would scream at me, but so be it. I opened the box and handed over the snow-white bar. While rummaging through my pack, I deliberately let the opening widen just enough. One of the quieter friends, a young master surnamed Li, spotted a tiny, exquisite porcelain bottle glinting inside my bag. Is that the 100-flower perfume you mentioned? Hook, line, sinker. I quickly closed the bag, acting flustered. I said that one was for my mother. I couldn't possibly sell it. That hit Li right in the heart. His own mother had just been complaining that all the cosmetics in the city bored her. He offered 20 taels. I hesitated. He jumped to 25. I said deal, this time without the drama. I pocketed the silver, handed over the perfume, cupped my fists in farewell, and marched down the stairs without looking back. Behind me, 2 rich kids clutching their treasures with big smiles, and several others kicking themselves for not speaking up sooner. Total take from 2 items that cost me about 600 copper coins, 45 taels of silver. Not bad for an afternoon snack at a restaurant. I slept well at the inn and woke up feeling great. Pushed open the window to the sounds of the city, vendors shouting, wheels rolling, people laughing. Yesterday's sales were just a small test, but they'd proved my strategy worked perfectly. Scarcity marketing plus a good story was enough to make rich people fight over my products. I headed out to grab breakfast at Wangjiang Tower. Good food and good eavesdropping, 2 birds with 1 stone. But as I got close, something was very wrong. The street in front of the restaurant was packed with people, 3 layers deep, completely blocking the entrance. Fancy carriages lined up, so far they'd paralyzed half the road. Rich merchants, wealthy wives dripping in jewelry, servants carrying gift boxes, all of them pushing and shoving, trying to get inside. I slowed down and blended into the edges of the crowd, listening. The restaurant manager and his staff had formed a human wall at the door, drenched in sweat, desperately holding people back. "Please stop pushing. We still have a business to run." A fat merchant in purple silk shoved past a worker and demanded they produce the young man who'd eaten there yesterday. The manager nearly cried. The guest had paid his bill and left. They had no idea where he went. A wealthy woman jabbed her fan at the manager's nose, accusing the restaurant of hiding me so they could keep the goods for themselves. The crowd started threatening to tear the place apart. I stood outside taking it all in, feet frozen to the ground. They were all here looking for me. For 1 bar of soap and 1 bottle of perfume. This was insane. I spotted Zhao and Li in the middle of the mob, surrounded by people firing questions at them. The two of them were eating up the attention, playing mysterious while showing off. Zhao cleared his throat dramatically and announced that after washing his hands with the snowflower soap, his skin stayed smooth, white, and fragrant for an entire day. The crowd gasped. Every woman's eyes lit up like torches. Li fanned himself lazily and added that his 100-flower perfume was even more incredible. 1 drop filled an entire room with elegant fragrance, better than imperial tribute goods. His mother was absolutely delighted with it. The two of them performing together was better advertising than I could have paid for. The crowd went wild. Does such a thing really exist? I must have it today. Steward, search every inn in the city for a young man in plain clothes with a travel pack. A silk shop owner pushed forward and offered the restaurant manager 100 taels just for information about where I was. Someone else bid 120, then 150. The manager looked like he was going to be sick. He genuinely didn't know. I stood at the edge of it all, watching my face cycle through surprise, excitement, and finally caution. I'd tossed out 2 tiny pieces of bait and accidentally set the entire city on fire. These rich people's hunger for something new, combined with their terrifying spending power, was beyond anything I'd imagined. This city was absolutely a gold mine. But right now, this was dangerous for me. I'd come here to scout quietly, not become the most wanted man in Nanyang. If I showed my face, this mob would tear me apart trying to throw money at me. Wangjiang Tower was definitely off limits now. I smacked my lips with a twinge of regret. I'd really been looking forward to breakfast there. After breakfast, the plan crystallized in my head. There was serious money to be made, but I couldn't be the one standing out front selling. I needed a middleman, someone who could move my products at premium prices while keeping all the attention and trouble away from me. One face popped into my mind immediately, Mama Xiang from the Hall of Flowers. She was greedy, and nothing motivates a partner like pure greed. She had connections. Her pleasure house was basically a filter for the richest men in the city, all of them spending fortunes to impress women. And she had a built-in sales force, 100 girls who'd become walking advertisements the moment they used my soap. The perfect tool. I headed to the Hall of Flowers, but skipped the front door this time. I went around to the back alley, where the air smelled like perfume mixed with kitchen slop. I flicked a few coins to an errand boy and told him to fetch Mama Xiang. Big business opportunity. She peeked out the back door, saw me, and her eyes practically caught fire. After what Yunner's soap had caused that morning, she'd already figured I was someone special. I told her to find a quiet spot. She led me to a dusty storage room. Smelled like mold, but nobody would bother us. I got straight to it. I asked if she'd heard about the chaos at Wangjiang Tower today. Everyone hunting for the man who sold mysterious treasures. Her smile froze. She'd heard. "That man is me," I said. She nearly stopped breathing. I tossed her a box of soap to prove it. The gardenia scent hit her, and she knew it was real. I laid out the deal. She'd buy from me at a fixed price. I'd give her exclusive selling rights. Snowflower soap and 100-flower perfume. She knew better than anyone what these things were fetching on the street. People at Wangjiang Tower were bidding 150 taels just for information about where to find me. I watched her mental abacus go into overdrive. Buy from me cheap, sell for 3, 4, 5 times the price to desperate rich women. The profit margin was enormous. She practically screamed her agreement. I set one rule: never reveal that the goods came from me. She swore on everything she had. Then she asked how much stock I could provide. I told her not to worry about supply. For today, I'd start her off with 15 bars of soap and 10 bottles of perfume. Then I did the math out loud and deliberately got it wrong at first, quoting a low number. Her eyes went wide with hope. I paused, corrected myself. 15 bars at 20 taels each, 300. 10 bottles at 20 each, 200. Total, 500 taels, she froze. She'd expected to pay after selling, not up front. Who carries 500 taels around? I let my expression go cold. Did she think she was getting this for free? She stammered that she didn't have that much cash on hand. I told her I didn't care how she got it. She had half an hour, or I'd take the deal to Madame Lee at the rival house across town. Heard she had plenty of money these days. That was a straight threat, and it worked. She hiked up her skirt and sprinted out of there like the building was on fire. I waited calmly in that musty room. She wouldn't run. Smart people know when fortune is knocking. Sure enough, she was back in under 15 minutes, hair falling loose, panting hard, clutching a thick stack of bank notes. 500 taels, counted and ready. I took the money without checking it, handed over the goods, and dusted off my clothes. Then I told her to open the #1 room for me again. And send Yunner up. I thought for a second. Also, whoever's got the best figure in this place, send her too. Mama Xiang's grin spread across her face like a blooming flower. She promised me I wouldn't be disappointed. I'd earned 500 taels in 15 minutes and was about to enjoy a very good evening. Not a bad day's work. In the #1 room, with fine incense burning, I settled into the big armchair and waited. Yunner came in first, still shy as ever in a pale green dress. Then Xiang'er walked in, a completely different energy. She wore a fitted peach-pink silk dress that showed off every curve, moved with a natural confidence, and had bold makeup that matched her personality. Yunner carefully poured my wine, remembering her spill from last time. But before she could hand me the cup, Xiang'er swept past her and planted herself right on my lap without a moment's hesitation. That was exactly what I wanted. I was spending good money for comfort and service, not to sit around worshipping some cold beauty like Su Qing. Xiang'er was warm and forward. She came to me instead of waiting to be approached. She pressed close, tracing lazy circles on my chest, whispering about how all the girls in the house were jealous of Yunner's soap, calling it a treasure from heaven. I knew exactly what she was after. She wanted my products too. But I didn't mind. Desire creates motivation. The more these women wanted what I had, the harder they'd work to please me. I told her if she took good care of me, she'd get her reward. She lifted her chin into my hand without flinching, smooth as a cat, and promised she'd make me happier than I'd ever been. She took the wine cup from Yunner's stiff hands, drank it herself in one gulp, then cupped my face and kissed the wine into my mouth. The taste of the liquor mixed with her rouge was 100 times better than drinking alone. I could feel her heart racing despite her confident act. She pulled back, flushed, and asked if the wine was sweet. I said one word and wrapped my arm around her waist. Worth every coin. I finally understood why rich men threw fortunes away in places like this. The luxury, the attention, the feeling of being worshipped and fought over, it was addictive. Yunner stood off to the side, fidgeting with her sleeve, clearly out of her depth watching Xiang'er work. I noticed and waved her over. I fed her a grape and told her to relax. I liked both of them, one lively, one quiet. The contrast was exactly what I enjoyed. Xiang'er caught that, and her competitive instinct kicked in. She wasn't about to lose ground to the shy girl. She offered to dance. I raised an eyebrow. She could dance? She said every girl in the house had her talents, but warned that her dancing was a bit different. She called for a hand drum, stripped down to a tight dance outfit, and kicked off her shoes. Standing barefoot on the carpet, she transformed. Gone was the flirtatious courtesan. In her place stood something wild and magnetic, like a desert rose about to bloom. The drumbeat started under her own hands, and she began to move. It wasn't the gentle, classical dancing you'd see in this region. It was foreign, bold, fiery, every twist of her hips, every roll of her waist dripping with raw seduction. My breathing got heavier without me even noticing. Xiang'er's dance was something else entirely. I'd seen similar stuff on screens in my past life, but watching it live, up close, no comparison. Every glance, every twist hit exactly the right nerve. She was barefoot on the carpet, her body moving under that thin dance outfit, turning seduction into an art form. Even Yunner was stunned watching her. The shy girl clearly realized she was playing in a completely different league. When the drumbeat cut off at its peak, Xiang'er dropped to her knees right in front of me, chest heaving, sweat glistening on her forehead. She looked up with those liquid eyes and asked if I liked her dance. Her voice was husky from the effort, and it was more alluring than ever. I wiped the sweat from her brow and asked where she'd learned to dance like that. She said she was part foreign, and the dance came from her homeland. Then she climbed back onto my lap, wrapped her arms around my neck, and whispered that she'd dance for me every day, only for me, if I wanted. That was basically asking me to buy her contract outright. I looked at her, then glanced at Yunner standing frozen in the corner. Fire and water, one bold and blazing, the other quiet and gentle. Why choose? I wanted both. I stood up and walked out. Sent a servant to fetch Mama Xiang. She came rushing upstairs, all smiles and worry, assuming the girls had done something wrong. I told her they'd been great. Then I pulled her into an empty room and got straight to it. Your girls, do you sell them? She put on her proper face and recited the standard line about how the Hall of Flowers was a respectable establishment and the girls were artists, not merchandise. I told her to cut the act. Xiang'er and Yunner, name a price. She realized I was dead serious and her mind started racing. I could practically hear the gears turning. Xiang'er was her rising star, great body, great skills, big future earning potential. Yunner was basically dead weight in her eyes, pretty but timid, nearly useless, always on the edge of being demoted. She'd bundle the valuable one with the worthless one and charge premium for both. Classic sales trick. First came the performance. She dabbed fake tears with her silk handkerchief, going on about how Xiang'er cost her a fortune to import from the western regions, and how she was grooming her to be the next Su Qing. Even Yunner got praised. Apparently literary types loved her cold, quiet charm. I let her finish her show, then told her to drop the act and give me a number. She held up one finger. 1,000 taels. Not a coin less. She was gambling that my desire would make me pay anything. My expression didn't change. I leaned back and tapped the table. Mama Xiang, aren't you forgetting something? I handed you 500 taels just this afternoon for merchandise. Now you want 1,000 for 2 girls? You're trying to get that 500 back from me, plus another 500 on top. Her little scheme, laid bare in 2 sentences. For the first time, I saw cold sweat actually appear on her face. Mama Xiang tried to laugh it off, wiping sweat from her forehead, saying business was business and each deal was separate. I told her that's not how things worked with me. I walked to the window and looked out at the river below, boats gliding past, lanterns glittering on both banks. Then I spelled it out for her. What I'd given her today wasn't just 500 taels worth of goods. It was a pipeline to wealth, the kind that could put every other pleasure house in Nanyang under her heel. She knew it. She'd seen the madness at Wangjiang Tower. People offering 150 taels just for a rumor about where to find me. Her batch of soap and perfume, marketed right, could bring back not just 500 taels, but 5,000, maybe 50,000 over time. That's why she'd coughed up 500 in cash so fast. She was betting my supply would keep flowing. You're right. I was being short-sighted, she said, dropping her attitude down several notches. Good. Now we could talk about the girls again. I rejected 1,000 taels flat. She asked what I thought was fair. I held up 5 fingers. 500. She nearly screamed. She'd expected me to haggle down to maybe 700 or 800, not cut it in half. Xiang'er alone was worth 300 or 400 in her mind. 2 girls for 500 felt like giving them away. I broke it down for her. How much had she actually spent raising them? Food, clothes, lessons, maybe 100 taels total? I was offering 5 times her investment. Even with Xiang'er earning well, how much could one girl bring in per night? 20 taels? 50? I was handing her years of future earnings in one lump sum. She sputtered, but couldn't argue the math. I knew her costs better than she did, and that rattled her. She tried one last stand, said she couldn't face the other girls if she sold so cheap. Time to close the deal. I casually mentioned the rival house across town, Ichuan Court. Their Madam Li had come into money recently and was looking for special gifts to impress a powerful official's wife. Wouldn't it be something if Li got exclusive access to my products instead? The threat hit her like a hammer. She could picture it instantly. Ichuan Court's girls glowing with snowflower soap, smelling like 100-flower perfume, stealing every customer while her own house withered. That was worse than death to a woman like her. Her last wall crumbled. She dropped to her knees, grabbed my leg, and started crying. Real tears this time. She admitted she'd been greedy and stupid. 500 was fine. She accepted. I'd known she would. With greedy people, you just dangle something bigger than what you're taking away. I told her to get up. She scrambled to her feet, wiped her face, and stood there meekly like a servant waiting for orders. Then I delivered the punchline. One problem, though, I said, spreading my hands with a perfectly straight face. I don't actually have 500 taels on me right now. She stared at me, completely speechless. After all that haggling, I didn't even have the money? Was I messing with her this whole time? Mama Xiang's face crumbled. She asked if I was joking. I told her to look at my face. Did I look like I was joking? I genuinely didn't have 500 taels in cash. The bank notes she'd given me that afternoon weren't enough either. But honestly, I'd never planned to spend my own money on this. She went from desperate to furious in a heartbeat. She accused me of playing games. Who tries to buy people with no money? The Hall of Flowers didn't do credit. She snapped, forgetting all about being respectful. I let her fume for a moment, then told her calmly that I never said anything about credit. I didn't have silver, but I had something better. That stopped her cold. Her eyes lit up as the answer hit her. My products. The soap. The perfume. I leaned forward. Goods for payment. Simple as that. Her abacus brain went into overdrive. She'd paid me 500 taels for the first batch just hours ago and hadn't even started selling yet. But wealthy clients were already sending servants to inquire. The prices people were willing to pay were nearly double what she'd paid me. If I gave her more product instead of cash, she wouldn't just break even. She'd come out way ahead. I asked her what she thought one bar of snowflower soap would sell for on the open market. She hesitated, then gave me an honest answer. 50 taels to the right buyer. The perfume? At least 100 per bottle. Those were her own estimates, not mine. I held up my fingers and did the math. 20 bars of soap to cover the 500 taels. At her own projected price of 50 taels per bar, that was 1,000 taels worth of merchandise, double the price of the two girls. She blinked. Only 20 bars. She'd expected a mountain of product. Something fell off to her, but the numbers worked in her favor no matter how she sliced it. I let my expression darken and offered her an alternative. I could go home, get the cash, and come back in 10 or 15 days. Her face went white at that. 10 days was an eternity. What if the rival madam at Ichuan Court got to me first? No. 20 bars is fine. I trust you completely. She ran the math one more time in her head. She'd spent 500 taels on the first batch. Now she was trading two girls, one valuable, one not worth much. For 20 more bars, she could sell at 50 taels each. That was 1,000 taels in merchandise. No matter how she looked at it, she was coming out ahead. Her doubts vanished. I stood up and clapped my hands. Then it settled. Go get their contracts. Mama Xiang shot out of the room like she'd been launched from a cannon, practically sprinting to get the contracts. I sipped cold tea and savored the moment. This whole deal was truly getting something for nothing. She thought she was the clever hunter, but from start to finish, she'd been the fish in my net. She believed she was profiting, and by her math, she was, but I was profiting far more. That's what happens when you have information the other side doesn't. She came back, clutching an old wooden box with a solemn look on her face. Inside were two slightly yellowed contract papers covered in tiny handwriting, each stamped with a red thumbprint at the bottom. Xianger and Yunner's ownership papers. In this era, these thin sheets of paper decided a person's entire fate. She asked for her goods. I stepped out, pretending to fetch them from next door. In the hallway, I opened the system shop and redeemed 20 bars of gardenia snowflower soap. Cost me 2,000 copper coins total. They appeared in my cloth bag instantly. I brought the heavy bag back. She opened it with trembling hands, and the gardenia scent flooded the room. She didn't even bother counting, just hugged the bag like it was her own child. I had her sign the transfer on both contracts. She wrote that the girls were sold from the Hall of Flowers to Sun Yi, all ties severed, then signed her name and pressed her red thumbprint. She slid both papers across to me. I tucked them into my robe. Two girls acquired for 20 bars of soap that cost me 2,000 copper coins. In silver terms, that was about 2 taels. For 2 people. I told her to bring the girls in. I wanted to announce it to their faces, with Mama Xiang present, so there'd be no confusion about who they belonged to now. When Xianger and Yunner walked in, they bowed to both of us, not knowing what was happening. Mama Xiang's warm act was gone. She wore her cold madam's face now. Kneel, she ordered. They dropped to their knees, confused and scared. She told them flatly, They no longer belonged to the Hall of Flowers. Their contracts had been sold. She pointed at me and said I was their new master. Their life and death were in my hands now. She told them to bow to me immediately. Xiang'er didn't hesitate. She knocked her forehead to the floor and called out clearly, "Your servant Xiang'er greets her master." She was smart. She'd probably guessed this was coming. For a girl like her, being bought by a wealthy man was actually the best possible outcome. Better than spending years in a pleasure house. Yuna was a different story. She looked like a lamb being led to slaughter, moved from one cage to another. Her clear eyes were filled with pure terror. She had no idea what kind of person I was or what I'd do with her. I held up both contracts and showed them. The deal was done. The past was over. From now on, they answered to me and me alone. Xiang'er bowed again without a word. Yun'er just trembled and managed a small nod. I told them to stand up, gather their things, and follow me. We were leaving. I brought them back to the Lucky Fortune Inn. The old innkeeper nearly dropped his abacus when he saw me walk in with two beautiful girls. I tossed him some silver for an extra room next to mine and led them upstairs. Before leaving them to settle in, I laid down my rules, and they weren't what the girls expected. Forget everything you learned at the Hall of Flowers, I told them. The fake smiles, the cheap tricks, the act of pleasing men, all of it gone. Wash that paint off your faces and change into the clothes I left on the bed. I'd prepared two simple cotton outfits, one pale pink, one light green. Nothing like the flashy silk they wore at the pleasure house. Then I walked out and let them figure it out. Back in my room, I tackled the real problem, how to bring them home. I couldn't exactly tell my honest old father and my pregnant wives that I'd gone out to buy merchandise and came back with two pretty girls from a brothel. My father would beat me with a stick. My wives might hold their tongues, but resentment would build, and a war in the back courtyard was the last thing I needed. These two needed a clean, believable identity. Orphans I found on the road. Too flimsy. Nobody would believe two gorgeous girls were just wandering around homeless. Distant relatives? My father knew our family tree better than I did. Then it clicked. The classic story, cliché but perfectly believable in this era. I'd say they were daughters of a traveling merchant I met during my sourcing trip. The merchant's business had failed. He'd fallen gravely ill, and on his deathbed he'd entrusted his two daughters to me out of gratitude for past help. I took them in out of compassion and brought them home as household attendants. This story covered everything. Their origins, a dead out-of-town merchant nobody could verify. Their talents, a merchant's daughters learning music and dance was perfectly normal. And it made me look righteous and kind, which fit the values of this society. People would praise me, not question me. I even came up with new names. Xiang'er reeked of the pleasure quarter. She'd become Xiaohe, summer lotus, fiery yet pure, like her dancing. Yun'er was decent enough, but still a brothel name. She'd be Qiuyu, autumn moon, quiet and clear like her personality. Meanwhile, next door, the girls were staring at the wash basin and the plain clothes, unsure what to do. Yun'er asked timidly if they really had to wash off their makeup. Xiang'er didn't hesitate. She soaked a cloth and started wiping her face clean, layer after layer of powder and rouge coming off, revealing healthy, naturally striking features underneath. Without the heavy makeup, her eyes were actually clearer, her bone structure sharper. She told Yun'er to do the same. We're not Hall of Flowers girls anymore. Our master doesn't like it, so we don't do it. She was already calling me, Master, smart girl. Yun'er washed up too. When they stood side by side in the mirror, the transformation was remarkable. Xiang'er looked like an exotic rose, vivid and captivating. Yun'er was a rain-washed lotus, delicate and sweet. In those simple cotton dresses, with clean faces, there wasn't a trace of their former lives. They looked like respectable sisters from a decent merchant family. When I knocked and saw them, even I was impressed. Their natural beauty was genuinely better without all the paint. Good foundations on both of them. I told them their old names were dead. From now on, she was Xiaohe. She was Qiuyu. They whispered the names to themselves, feeling their old selves drift away. Then I sat them down and told them the cover story, every detail of the dying merchant, the deathbed promise, how I'd taken them in. I made them memorize it. Anyone who asked would hear the same version. They listened in stunned silence. I'd just handed them something they never thought they'd have again, a clean past, a respectable origin, a fresh start. The way they looked at me after that was different from before. It wasn't just obedience or gratitude. Something deeper had shifted. The next morning, I got ready to head home. Since I was supposed to be a traveling merchant, I needed to look the part. I took Xiaohe and Xiaoyu to the livestock market and bought a used mule cart with a rain cover, sturdy enough for long trips, humble enough to match a small-time trader's image. Back at the inn, I left the girls in their room, took some empty sacks into mine, and locked the door. I opened the system shop and went on a shopping spree. Large stocks of snowflower soap and 100-flower perfume for the store launch back home. I also picked up crystal mirrors, the kind that showed your reflection perfectly clear. At 200 copper coins each, those would be my weapon for cracking into the top-tier market. One look at these, and even the most powerful families would come knocking. The sacks filled up instantly. I loaded everything onto the cart under the oilcloth cover, settled my bill, and we rolled out of Nanyang city gates. 3 days on the road. Xiaohe adjusted fast. She kept the cart tidy, handed me food and water at rest stops, acting like a proper attendant. Xiaoyu was still curled up in the corner most of the time, but she'd answer quietly when I spoke to her. Progress. When Qingyuan County appeared on the horizon, I drove straight to the shop first. Goxing spotted me from far away and came running out grinning. Then he noticed the 2 girls in the cart, and his jaw hit the ground. One gorgeous and bold, one sweet and delicate. I smacked his head and told him to stop staring and help unload. After storing the merchandise, I walked the girls home to the mansion. The moment I stepped through the gate, the whole family came pouring out. My father rushed from the main hall, overjoyed. My wives followed in a flock of happy voices, Wanru, Mainyang, all of them crowding around me. Then my father saw Xiaohe and Xiaoyu behind me. His smile collapsed. He looked them up and down, one more beautiful than the other. Put 2 and 2 together about how long I'd been gone, and his face turned purple with rage. He ripped off his shoe and raised it over his head. You rotten brat. 5 women at home isn't enough. You go on 1 trip and drag back 2 more. I'll beat you to death. You wastrel. My wives saw the girls too. I could tell what they were thinking behind their composed faces, something like, well, that's our husband for you. But they kept quiet. I dodged the shoe and yelled for the girls to explain. Xiaohe dropped to her knees in front of my father immediately, pulling the still-frozen Xiaoyu down with her. She launched into the rehearsed story with tears in her voice. How they were daughters of a merchant who'd done business with me, how their father fell ill and died during the trip, how they were left alone with nowhere to go, and how I took pity on them and brought them home to work as servants. Just a bowl of rice and a roof, that's all they asked. She performed beautifully. Xiaoyu cried on cue beside her. The scene was heartbreaking. My father froze with the shoe still in the air. He looked at the 2 sobbing girls, then at me standing there looking deeply wronged. The shoe came down. Wanru, kind as always, stepped forward and helped them both up. She gently scolded my father for swinging before asking questions. The old man's face went red with embarrassment. He coughed, put his shoe back on, and brushed the dust off my clothes. Well, I guess I jumped to conclusions. You did the right thing, son. Helping people in need, that's proper. I'll have your stepmother cook something nice to welcome everyone. I was celebrating inside, but kept my face perfectly hurt and innocent. Dad, you really need to stop being so impulsive. Da Xiao stepped in right away, helping the 2 girls up and scolding my father for making a scene. She told them they were family now. My father shrank back, mumbling that he'd just been worried I was going down a bad path. Wanru came out too, belly huge, leaning on Chuanlu for support. She looked over the 2 new girls carefully. She wasn't stupid, but she smiled warmly at them and greeted me like everything was normal. I held her arm and told her she shouldn't be walking around in her condition. Dinner was a full table, but an awkward one. My father sat at the head with Da Xiao, fussing over me and saying I must be tired from the road. My wives took turns stealing glances at Xiaohe and Xiaoyu, who sat quietly at the far end of the table. Xiaohe kept her head down, eating her rice, feeling every pair of eyes on her. Curious, suspicious, hostile. She knew exactly what she and Xiaoyu looked like to these women, wolves in sheep's clothing. I saw all of it. My dying merchant daughter story was good enough to fool my honest old father, but these women weren't buying it completely. Still, as long as I stuck to my version, none of them would dare make waves. After dinner, Da Xiao arranged for the girls to sleep in the side room near the west wing. They followed Chuanlu out, and I watched them go, especially the sway of Xiaohe's waist as she walked. The fire I'd been keeping down all day started creeping back up. I sat in my study with zero interest in books. Xiaohi's face kept floating through my mind. That mix of boldness and shyness since she'd put on the plain clothes. She was mine. Why not? I sent a maid to fetch her. Just told them my tea had gone cold, and I needed a fresh pot. She came in wearing a simple blue work outfit, hair pinned up casually, carrying a tea tray. Even dressed down, she was stunning. Her movements were graceful and practiced as she set out the tea things. I stood up and moved behind her. She felt my breath on her neck and went still. I reached around and took her hands. They were cool. I turned her to face me, lifted her chin. In the candlelight, her cheeks were flushed, her lashes trembling, her lips full and soft. Then someone hammered on the door like the house was on fire. Master, master, it's bad. The first madam is having her baby. Chuanlu's panicked, tearful voice hit me like a bucket of ice water. Every trace of desire vanished instantly. I pushed away from Xiaohi and threw open the door. Chuanlu was drenched in sweat. Wanru's water had broken. The pain had started hard and fast. I didn't think. I didn't look back at Xiaohi standing frozen in the study. I just ran. Wanru's courtyard was chaos. Maids rushing in and out with hot water, Daqiao directing them to set up the birthing room. My father pacing the yard like a headless fly muttering, "What do we do?" over and over. I shouted for the midwife. Already sent for, Daqiao told me. On her way. From inside the room came Wanru's screams. Raw, agonized cries that cut through me like a blade. I tried to go in, but Daqiao blocked me. The birthing room was no place for a man. Bad luck. So I stood outside that closed door, listening to every cry, feeling my heart twist tighter and tighter. The midwife arrived and charged in, barking orders for ginseng slices, scissors, and strong liquor. The door slammed shut behind her. Time stopped. My father wrung his hands. Daqiao tried to reassure him. Wanru was healthy. The baby was positioned right. Everything would be fine. I stood under the eaves, silent, staring at that door. Then, a sharp, clear cry split the night sky. A baby's wail. Everyone in the courtyard froze. My whole body unclenched at once. The door creaked open. Chuanlu ran out beaming, dropped to her knees in front of me and my father. Congratulations, master. Congratulations, old master. The first madam has given birth. It's a big, healthy boy. At that exact moment, the system chimed in my head. First son born. Family prosperity +10. And a reward. A divine skill called perfect memory. The ability to remember everything I see or read, permanently, in perfect detail. I was still floating in a daze of pure joy. I had a son. In this world, I had an heir. That feeling hit harder than making my first fortune, buying my first mansion, or even having my first woman. Nothing compared. I tried to rush into the birthing room, but Daqiao stopped me, laughing. The midwife was still cleaning up the baby and wiping down Wanru. My father had already run off to the family hall to burn incense for the ancestors, so excited he could barely stand. While I waited, I remembered the system had given me some reward. Perfect memory. I scoffed at first. What use was that? I wasn't planning to take the imperial exams or become some scholar. I was a businessman. I had Goshing and could hire accountants later. The system was being cheap. My firstborn son arrives, and all I get is a memorization trick? How about turning things to gold or being immune to poison? Then Chuanlu brought my son out, wrapped tight in a red swaddling cloth. I reached for him with stiff, clumsy arms. When that tiny, warm, soft body settled into my hands, my heart nearly melted. His wrinkled little face looked like an unripe monkey, not handsome by any standard. But to me, he was the most precious thing in the world. I touched his cheek with one finger. So impossibly smooth. A wave of responsibility and fulfillment washed over me that I'd never felt before. I wasn't just a husband and a son anymore. I was a father. My old man appeared at my elbow, peering at his grandson through teary eyes, babbling that the baby looked exactly like me as a newborn. Daqiao was crying too, thanking heaven that the Sun family had an heir. Off to the side, Xiaohi and Qiuyu stood watching from the corridor. I caught Xiaohi's complicated expression. In the study earlier, things had been heading somewhere obvious, and then Wanru's labor had shattered the moment. Xiaohi had seen the desire vanish from my eyes the instant I heard about the baby. She understood now where she actually stood. Useful, desirable, but ultimately something I could push aside without a second thought. My father asked me to name the boy. I thought for a moment. I'm a modern person. Ancient-style names aren't my strength. But this was my firstborn. It had to mean something. Sun Nianzu, I said. Nian for remembrance, Zhu for ancestors. Never forget where you came from. My father repeated it a few times, eyes brightening. He loved it. Da Qiao agreed. Deep meaning, good fortune. I handed the baby to Da Qiao and went in to see Wanru. She was lying there pale as paper, hair plastered with sweat, exhausted beyond words. But when she saw me, her eyes lit up. I sat on the bed, took her cold hand, and told her she'd done so well. She smiled weakly and said giving me a firstborn was her blessing. She tried to sit up. I pushed her gently back down and told her to rest. Chicken soup was coming. Nothing mattered now except her recovery. I stayed until she fell asleep, then slipped out quietly. My father declared a feast for tomorrow to celebrate. We didn't know many people in the county seat yet, but the gesture mattered. The whole mansion buzzed with happiness. But once my excitement settled, my mind circled back to business. I'd told Goshing to renovate the shop and promised him design drawings. That couldn't wait any longer. My store was the first step in building something much bigger. I sat down in the study with ink and paper, picked up the brush, and immediately hit a wall. I'm a modern person. Keyboards and ballpoint pens, sure. But this floppy calligraphy brush was like wrestling an eel. My lines came out crooked and ugly. Worse, the shop layouts from my past life were just scattered fragments in my head. I couldn't pull together a complete design. I threw down the brush in frustration. Then it hit me. Perfect memory. I closed my eyes and started trying to recall stores I'd visited in my previous life. At first, everything was blurry. But as I concentrated, the images sharpened. Not just shapes, but perfect high-definition pictures. A Muji store, warm wooden shelves, soft yellow lighting, products arranged with clean precision. An Apple store, enormous glass walls, minimalist display tables, a space that felt like the future. A trendy bookshop, floor-to-ceiling shelves, clever lighting design, every corner photogenic. Every detail was razor-sharp. I could read price tags on individual products. It was like watching a movie in my head. My eyes snapped open and my heart was pounding. This was perfect memory. This was incredible. I grabbed the brush again. This time, the images in my brain projected straight onto the paper as if I'd been drawing for years. The lines flowed smooth and precise. I designed a wide, bright entrance flanked by tall transparent glass panels so passers-by could see everything inside. An open interior with no cluttered partitions. Neat rows of shelving organized by product category. Pure white walls, clean stone floors. I even sketched light-focusing shades for the ceiling to brighten the space naturally. In the time it takes to burn one stick of incense, I had a complete shop design on paper, something that would blow the minds of everyone in this era. My hands were shaking with excitement as I stared at what I'd drawn. Now I understood what this skill really was. It wasn't for studying books or passing exams. It let me reach into my brain and pull out the entire 21st century. Architecture, engineering, chemistry, medicine, agriculture, every scrap of knowledge I'd ever absorbed from books, websites, documentaries, all of it stored perfectly, retrievable on demand. I was carrying a living encyclopedia inside my skull. This time, I was truly about to make a fortune beyond anything I'd imagined. I called out to the servants, "Get steward's son in here, now." Goshing came running into the study, sweating. I pointed him to the design I'd just drawn. He stared at it like I'd written in some alien language. Boxes, circles, strange markings. He had no frame of reference for any of it. He asked if it was writing, or maybe a painting. I told him it was the blueprint for our shop. He needed to renovate according to this plan. His eyes nearly fell out of his head when he saw the giant rectangle at the front labeled glass. He thought I meant the tiny, precious kind of glass that gets set into jewelry, using it as an entire wall. He said I'd be building a crystal palace and asked how much that would cost. Plus, a see-through wall would let everyone look right in, and people would freeze in winter. I showed him a small crystal mirror from the system shop to explain what I meant. He took one look at his own reflection, every stubble, every pore perfectly clear, and screamed, nearly dropping it. He'd only ever seen blurry bronze mirrors. This thing looked like sorcery to him. I explained I wanted this kind of glass made into a massive wall at the shop entrance. His brain was short-circuiting. He realized that just this one wall would make the whole county lose their minds before we even opened for business. He asked where we'd find glass that big. I told him not to worry about that. I had my sources. He just needed to hire the best craftsmen and build a solid frame. Then I walked him through the interior design. All products displayed on open shelves where customers could browse, touch, and choose for themselves. He objected immediately. Every shop in town kept their goods locked in cabinets. Leaving things out was asking to be robbed. I told him it wouldn't be a problem. First, the shop would be bright and well-staffed with attendants walking the floor. Second, and more importantly, we'd make shopping feel like a luxury experience. Letting customers choose freely showed respect. Wealthy ladies and young mistresses wouldn't risk their dignity by stealing. Their reputation was worth more than anything on our shelves. It was just basic retail psychology from my old world, but to Goshing it sounded revolutionary. I pointed out the checkout counter on the blueprint, tall and wide, positioned so the clerk sitting behind it could see the entire shop. I told him every wall had to be whitewashed with lime, as many coats as needed until everything was spotlessly bright. Anyone walking in should feel like they'd entered a heavenly palace. Goshing was fired up by the end of it. He slapped his chest and swore he'd tear the place down and rebuild it if that's what it took. He'd make it the most impressive shop not just in the county, but in the whole prefecture. I handed him 500 taels in bank notes for materials and labor, the best craftsmen, the best materials. If the money ran short, come back for more. Only one rule: the work had to be perfect. His hands shook holding that stack of notes. The trust one was placing in him overwhelmed him. He dropped to his knees with tears in his eyes, swearing he'd die before letting me down. I pulled him up and told him to stop kneeling every time he got emotional. He was the Sun family's head steward now. He needed to carry himself like one. Before he left, I added one more thing. The shop was his priority, but I needed him and Suohua to also keep a close eye on things at home, especially around Wanru's courtyard during her recovery, and around Xiaohe and Xiaoyu. If anyone started gossiping or stirring trouble, I wanted to know immediately. He understood instantly. The back courtyard had to stay peaceful while I was building the front. After he left, I let out a long breath. The hardest part was starting, and now it was in motion. The blueprint was drawn, the team was in place, the money was flowing. I rubbed my temples. Long day. Then my mind drifted back to Xiaohe. That moment in the study before Wanru's labor interrupted us. The curve of her waist. The flush on her cheeks. It was time to finish what I'd started. I sent a maid to fetch Xiaohe. Same excuse as before, my tea had gone cold. In her side room, she wasn't sleeping. She'd been lying awake, staring at the moon, calculating her position in this household. She wasn't like Xiaoyu, content with a roof and meals. She'd seen the high life at the Hall of Flowers. She had ambition, and she knew her only path upward was through me. With Wanru having just delivered my firstborn, the window for a newcomer to gain standing was narrow. She needed to seize every chance. When the maid told her I was calling, she knew exactly what it meant. She changed quickly, put on a soft pink silk undergarment she'd saved from her old life, the kind that clung to every curve. No makeup. She let her hair down and tied it loosely with a ribbon, a few strands falling across her cheeks. Casual, but deliberate. She knew what she was doing. She knocked on the study door. I told her to come in. She set down the tea tray and started arranging the cups with practiced grace, but I wasn't interested in tea. I stood up, walked behind her. She felt me there, my breath, my presence, the weight of what was about to happen. I took her hands from behind. They were cool. I turned her around to face me and lifted her chin. In the candlelight, her cheeks were flushed, her lashes trembling, her lips soft and full. Her eyes held nervousness and shyness, but underneath that, a fierce determination. Last time, Wanru's labor had interrupted everything. Tonight, there would be no interruptions. I picked her up. She gasped softly and wrapped her arms around my neck. I carried her to the wide daybed in the back of the study and set her down. She was nothing like my wives. She was bold, skilled, and knew exactly how to read what I wanted. Every response was perfectly timed, every move designed to pull me deeper. This was someone trained in the art of pleasing a man, and she held nothing back. I liked it. I liked the feeling of complete control, of being the center of someone's entire focus. The night stretched on. She was extraordinary, passionate, responsive, generous with herself in a way that felt almost like a performance. except there was real heat behind it. But at the very end, I kept my head clear. I pulled away at the last moment. She was a treasure, but now wasn't the time for her to carry my child. A toy this entertaining shouldn't be tied down with pregnancy too quickly. There was more to enjoy first. She understood immediately. I saw a flicker of something cross her face. Disappointment that she hadn't secured her position with a child, but also a kind of relief. If I wasn't treating her as a breeding tool, it meant I valued her for what she could do, for the pleasure she brought me. That was her leverage, and she knew it. Without a word, she picked up a cloth and gently cleaned me, handling me like something precious. Attentive, careful, warm. I told her she'd done well. Her face lit up. That simple praise meant more to her than silver. I pulled her back into my arms and told her to sleep here tonight. She nestled against my chest, listening to my heartbeat. And for the first time since leaving the Hall of Flowers, she looked truly at peace. Smart woman. She knew when to push and when to yield. She'd be useful for a long time. After Xia, he became a regular in my study at night. The atmosphere around the mansion shifted in subtle ways. But Wanru's courtyard stayed calm. She'd just given birth to my firstborn, and her position was rock solid. She focused entirely on her recovery and the baby, leaving household matters to Da Qiao and Suohua. One afternoon, Mainyang waddled over to visit Wanru, her belly enormous. They chatted about little Nianzu growing fast, and how Mainyang's time was coming soon. Everything was prepared, the midwife, the supplies, all arranged by Da Qiao. Then, mid-conversation, Mainyang's face went white. Her water broke right there. Wanru shouted for help immediately. The whole courtyard exploded into action. Maids rushed in, carried Mainyang to the birthing room next door. Da Qiao came running, barking orders for hot water and clean cloths. I was at the shop going over plans with Gosheng when a servant came stumbling in with the news. I shoved the blueprints into Gosheng's arms and ran home. The wait was brutal, from afternoon straight through to nightfall. Every muffled cry from behind that door twisted my gut. I'd been through this once already with Wanru, but it didn't get easier. Then the door opened. A blood-covered midwife ran out beaming. "Congratulations, master. It's a boy, another son." I started to smile, but she wasn't done. She caught her breath and practically screamed. "There's still another one coming." Everyone froze. My brain short-circuited. Seconds later, another baby's cry rang out from inside. A second midwife rushed out holding a bundle. "It's a girl." Dragon and Phoenix twins. The courtyard erupted. Da Qiao burst into tears, hugging my father. The old man stood there grinning like a fool, repeating, "Our ancestors must be smiling down on us." Every servant in the yard dropped to their knees, bowing and shouting congratulations. In this era, boy-girl twins were considered the greatest possible blessing. I was overwhelmed. 2 babies, a son and a daughter, from one birth. I held them both, one in each arm. Son on the left, daughter on the right. Complete. The system chimed in my head. Congratulations on Dragon Phoenix twins. Family prosperity soaring. Special reward of 2,000 taels of silver deposited into the system space. Good timing. The shop renovation was eating money, and I still owed County Deputy Lu 300 taels for the property. I went in to see Mainyang. She was drained and pale but glowing with happiness when I walked in. I told her she was the Sun family's greatest hero. She smiled weakly and said it was her blessing to give me children. After she fell asleep, I called Gosheng and handed him 500 taels, 300 for the remaining shop debt to the county deputy, plus 200 extra. Actually, I corrected myself and gave him exactly the 500 I owed. I told him to deliver it to the deputy first thing tomorrow. In business, keeping your word matters most. My father asked me to name the children. The boy I called Sun Nianxing, Chung for sincerity. I wanted him to grow up honest and true. For the daughter, I did something that surprised everyone. I asked Mainyang to choose. Letting a concubine name her own child was a rare honor. Her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. She thought for a moment and said softly, "Sun Mingzhu, Mingzhu, a bright pearl." She hoped her daughter would shine her whole life, radiant and at peace. Sun Mingzhu, the pearl of our family. I liked it. Linger was the last of my wives still pregnant, and she was getting nervous. Hearing Mainyang's screams during labor had terrified her. She'd barely slept for days. She found me alone in the study and tugged at my sleeve with a pitiful face, saying she was scared of the pain. I couldn't help but smile. She was basically still a kid. So I made up the most ridiculous explanation I could think of. I told her childbirth was like pushing open a door. Wanru and Mingyang were weak, so their door was stuck and hard to push. But Linger was strong and healthy, so her door would practically swing open on its own. The baby would just slide right out before she even noticed. Really? Just slide out? She stared at me with those big wet eyes. When have I ever lied to you? I said with a straight face. Her storm cloud disappeared instantly. She bounced back to her usual cheerful self and dragged me off to see the twins. We went to Mingyang's courtyard where little Nianqing and Mingzhu were sleeping side by side. Linger hovered over them, poking and cooing, completely smitten. Mingyang teased her, enjoy the peace while it lasts, because soon she'd be too busy to breathe. Everyone laughed. With the back courtyard settled, I threw myself entirely into the shop. The renovation was nearly done. Following my blueprints, the place had been completely transformed. Walls whitewashed to a blinding white, floors laid with polished stone, rows of clean wooden shelves standing ready for merchandise. The whole space had a brightness and simplicity that didn't exist anywhere else in this era. Goshing proudly showed me the finished work. Everything matched the drawings perfectly, but he was puzzled about one thing. The front entrance was just a giant empty frame with no door. How were we supposed to do business with a gaping hole? I told him not to worry. That night, I cleared everyone out and stayed in the shop alone. I called up the system and ordered a custom sheet of flawless glass, sized exactly to fill that frame. 500 taels. The system was good at clawing back the money it gave me. It had just rewarded me 2,000 for the twins, and now it was taking a quarter back in one shot. Worth every coin. A flash of light, and an enormous, perfectly transparent glass panel appeared in the middle of the shop floor. I guided it into the wooden frame until it fit seamlessly. I set the grand opening for 3 days later, an auspicious date. Goshing spread the word across town. Qingyuan County's first, Mingchuan Yupin, was opening, with 12% off everything on opening day. The morning arrived. Before dawn, a crowd had already gathered outside. The storefront was hidden behind a massive red cloth, building anticipation. At the appointed hour, firecrackers exploded. I stood on the steps and announced, "Opening time." Grand opening. Goshing and the staff grabbed the red cloth and pulled it away. The crowd went silent. Then came a collective gasp that seemed to suck all the air off the street. Behind the cloth, no door, no wall, just an enormous, impossibly clear sheet of glass stretching across the entire storefront. Sunlight poured straight through it, lighting up the interior like broad daylight. People could see everything inside. The neat shelves, the staff standing at attention, all crystal clear. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. They called it crystal. They called it magic. They couldn't understand how business could work with a transparent wall. The crowd exploded with chatter. Before the noise could peak, I dropped the real bombshell. Opening day special, 12% off everything. And anyone who spent 20 taels or more would receive a free membership card, good for a permanent 30% discount on all future purchases. Membership cards? Permanent discounts? These concepts didn't exist here. People buzzed with confusion and excitement. But the wealthy wives and ladies who'd come didn't need to understand the details. Their eyes were locked on that glass wall and the tantalizing merchandise visible behind it. Someone shouted, "Let's go in," and a well-dressed woman was the first to step through the entrance. That broke the dam. Every woman in town with money to spend surged toward the door in a wave. The store was open for business. When the customers stepped inside, the shop hit them a second time. The whole place was blindingly bright. White walls, polished stone floors, and that massive glass wall flooding everything with sunlight. The wooden shelves were stocked with things nobody in this county had ever seen. Beautifully packaged soap bars with floral scents, tiny crystal mirrors 100 times clearer than any bronze mirror, silk scarves in colors and patterns that didn't exist anywhere else. And everything was out in the open. No locked cabinets, no waiting for a clerk to show you something. Customers could pick things up, touch them, hold them up to the mirrors. The wealthy ladies completely forgot their dignity. They scattered through the aisles in little groups, chattering and squealing like they discovered a new continent. Goshing and the staff were sweating bullets at first, terrified someone would steal something. But watching these high society women handle the merchandise with such delight, he relaxed. I'd been right. These ladies cared about their reputation far too much to pocket anything. The checkout counter soon had a long line. When the first woman's total came to over 20 taels, I walked over personally and explained the membership card. A beautifully made card with our store name on it. Spend 20 taels today, and you'd get permanent 30% off on everything, forever. Permanent discount. Identity symbol. Those words hit every wealthy woman in earshot right in the heart. The first lady grabbed one immediately. She held that little card like a trophy, showing it off to her friends. The women behind her who hadn't spent enough started scrambling back to the shelves to buy more, just to qualify. Others who already had their cards were casually flashing them to make their friends jealous. The membership card became the hottest status symbol in Qingyuan County overnight. Having one meant you had taste, money, and were a certified VIP. Shelves emptied visibly throughout the day. Goxing and the staff ran themselves ragged, collecting money until their hands were sore. By evening, when we finally closed, Goxing was practically collapsing against the counter. He stumbled over to me with the account book, hands trembling, and pointed at the bottom number. 513 taels. In one day, more than most established silk shops made in an entire month. I sipped my tea. Not bad. Good start. Goxing stared at me like I was a god. 500 taels, and I didn't even blink. Over the following days, the heat didn't cool down. Without the opening discount, daily revenue settled at a steady 1 to 200 taels, still enormous. The county's ladies treated the shop like a social club, dropping by daily just to stay current. Then Goxing came to me looking worried. The flower perfume, crystal mirrors, and several scarf styles had completely sold out. Most other stock was running low. At this rate, the shelves would be bare within 3 days. Time to restock. This time, I didn't want to disappear for 2 weeks pretending to travel to the prefecture. I'd already thought of a better cover story, a mysterious traveling merchant who passed through the area irregularly. I'd buy directly from him nearby, cutting out the long journey. That way I only needed to vanish for half a day. That evening, I had Goxing prepare a cart and told him I was going outside town to meet a supplier. We drove to a deserted grove outside the county walls. I told Goxing to stand guard outside and climbed into the cart alone. I closed my eyes and dove into the system shop. The full catalog spread out in my mind. This time, I was ordering enough to last a full month. With the mysterious traveling merchant as my cover story, restocking became effortless. Goxing would drive the cart outside town. I'd fill it from the system shop in the back, and we'd return with thousands of taels worth of new inventory. The shelves never went empty again. Once business stabilized, I promoted the sharpest clerk to be the shop's full-time manager. Goxing just had to check the books and inventory each day, freeing him to handle household affairs properly. And I finally had nothing to do. The business foundation was laid, babies were being born left and right, and the back courtyard was peaceful. For the first time, I got to enjoy the lazy life of a wealthy man. One afternoon, I was lying on the daybed in my study, flipping through a book without reading a single word. Something was missing. Then I remembered Xiaohi and Xiaoyu. Between the shop opening and Mainyang's delivery, I'd basically forgotten about them. Especially Xiaoyu. I'd barely spoken to her since bringing her home. One cool as moonlight, one hot as fire. Couldn't let my possessions gather dust. I sent for both of them. They came in and bowed. Xiaohi looked as stunning as ever, with a new hint of mature confidence in her eyes and obvious eagerness when she looked at me. Xiaoyu was still her quiet, distant self, head down, giving off a don't-touch-me aura. I surprised them both by calling Xiaoyu's name first. I pointed her to the dusty guqin in the corner and asked her to play. She sat down, and her fingers brought the instrument to life. The music was cold and melancholy but threaded with a quiet strength, exactly like her. When she finished, I told her it was good. Then I turned to Xiaohi and asked her to dance. Her face lit up instantly. Xiaoyu played again, this time lighter and faster. Xiaohi stripped down to her inner clothes and moved through the room like liquid fire. Every twist and turn perfectly seductive, every motion designed to captivate. Cold music and hot dancing blended together perfectly. I sat back with my tea, tapping along, watching a performance made entirely for me. Life was good. When the dance ended, I pulled Xiaohi into my arms, then reached over and drew Xiaoyu in too. Both of them, one on each side. Tonight, you're both staying. The night was long. From that day on, I lived exactly the kind of decadent life I'd fantasized about. Mornings sleeping in until the sun was high, the two girls already dressing me and setting out breakfast by the time I stirred. Afternoons of music and dancing in the study. Nights with both of them. I almost forgot what century I was in. Then one morning, frantic knocking dragged me out of sleep. Suehua was shouting through the door. Linger was in labor. I threw on clothes and sprinted to her courtyard. Everything was more organized this time. The household had gotten practiced at births. But I was nervous for a different reason. I'd told Linger that ridiculous story about the baby just sliding right out with zero pain. If she ended up screaming for hours like the others, she'd never forgive me. But incredibly, less than an hour after the midwife went in, the door opened. A daughter. Quick, smooth delivery. I stood there stunned. My nonsense prediction had actually come true. When I went inside, Linger was sweaty but beaming, in far better shape than Wanru or Mainyong had been after their deliveries. The moment she saw me, she grinned triumphantly. See? I told you. It didn't hurt at all. She just, whoosh, slid right out. I couldn't help laughing at her proud little face. Yes, our Linger is the toughest one in the family. She looked at the baby in my arms and asked if she could name this one herself, since all the other children had been named by me or by Mainyong. I told Linger she could name our daughter. Her eyes lit up. She thought about it and said shyly that since Mainyong's girl was Mingzhu, a bright pearl like the moon, ours should be Baozhu, a treasured pearl. She wanted her daughter to be cherished and held precious her whole life. Simple, maybe a little plain, but it was a mother's purest wish. I squeezed her hand and told her I loved it. She beamed. Then the system notification hit me, and I went rigid. The reward for this birth wasn't silver or some powerful combat skill. It was a weather forecast. A weather forecast. I opened the new interface in my mind. It looked like the cheapest weather app from my old world. Today, sunny. Tomorrow, sunny. Day after, sunny. Then clouds. And 5 days from now, massive rainstorm lasting 2 full days, with warnings about flooding and landslides. My blood ran cold. In this era, poor people lived in mud brick houses with thatched roofs. 2 days of heavy rain would collapse homes, flood fields, and drown livestock. Qingyuan County would be full of homeless, starving refugees. And what do refugees need most? Food. This wasn't just a disaster warning. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. If I stockpiled grain now and distributed it during the crisis, I'd win the hearts of the people and the gratitude of the government. Maybe even an official position. I kept my face calm, finished visiting Linger and the baby, then walked out with my smile gone. I pulled Goshing into the study and asked how much cash the shop had. About 800 taels after expenses, he said. Not enough. I went to a cabinet and pulled out a heavy box, 3,000 taels in bank notes, saved from system rewards and daily income. I pushed it across the desk. Starting today, I told him, take every trustworthy person we have, hire reliable day laborers, split into 5 teams. Go to every neighboring county, Linshan, Anping, Shimin, Qingshui. Buy grain, rice, wheat, whatever, I want all of it. Don't haggle, don't ask questions, just buy everything you can find. Goshing was stunned. We had 2 years' worth of food stored at home already. Why buy more? And buying recklessly would drive up prices. I told him not to ask why, just follow orders. I laid out the rules. First, speed. Everything had to be done in 4 days. Second, tell people we were expanding into the grain business. Keep purchases spread across many shops to avoid suspicion. Third, rent warehouses on the east and south sides of town, split the stockpile between them, post guards, and let nobody near. He saw my face and understood this was deadly serious. He swore he'd get it done even if he didn't sleep. For 4 days, Goshing and the teams raced between counties, hauling cartload after cartload of grain back to Qingyuan. Prices ticked up slightly from the buying spree, but my purchases were spread thin enough that nobody panicked. Some grain shop owners just muttered about the young owner of Mingchuan Yupin being reckless with money. I spent those 4 days acting completely normal, playing with my children, listening to Chiu Yu's music, watching Xiaohe dance, enjoying my nights. Nobody suspected a thing. But every morning, I checked the forecast in my head. On the 5th day, dawn was still clear, but the air felt heavy and damp. By afternoon, black clouds rolled in from the west like spilled ink. The sky darkened fast. Wind howled through the streets, slamming doors and windows. Thunder cracked like the sky was splitting open. Then the rain came. Not rain, a wall of water. It poured without mercy, without pause. By nightfall it was worse. In the east side slums, mud brick houses started collapsing. People screamed as roofs caved in. Families crawled out of the wreckage covered in mud, clutching their children, standing in knee-deep water with nowhere to go. The second day was the same. No break in the storm. At the county office, Magistrate Zhou Wenhai hadn't slept. Reports hammered him one after another. The east wall had crumbled and floodwater was pouring into the city. The south side porridge station had been swept away. Temples were overflowing with refugees. People had started looting. He screamed for a grain count. His advisor told him the government stores would feed the whole county for 3 days at most. With floods everywhere, bringing grain from outside was impossible. Zhou slumped in his chair, face ashen. Flood, famine, riots. He could already see himself being stripped of his title. Then a bailiff came stumbling in, voice shaking with disbelief. "Sir, the owner of Ming Chuang Yupin, Sun Yi, he set up a dozen porridge stations on the east and south sides. He's feeding people right now. He says his warehouses are full of grain." When Zhou Wenhai heard about my porridge stations, he practically flew out of his chair. He grabbed the messenger by the collar, demanding to know which boss son they were talking about. The bailiff stammered out my name. The guy who ran Ming Chuang Yupin. His advisor Chun tried to sow doubt, suggesting something suspicious about a mere shopkeeper having that much grain during a crisis. Zhou shut that down immediately. He didn't care if I was a bandit. If I had food, I was the county savior right now. He ordered a sedan chair and came straight to me through the flooded streets. On the way, he saw the devastation. Refugees huddled under eaves, faces blank with despair. But as he got closer to the east side, the smell changed. Rice porridge. Hot, thick, fragrant rice porridge cutting through the cold, wet air. People who'd been sitting in numb misery started moving toward it. When he arrived, the scene stopped him cold. A dozen big tents lined up, massive iron pots bubbling with white porridge, dozens of my staff ladling it out to long, orderly lines of people. Goshing was marching up and down with a megaphone, keeping things calm. Old people and children first, everyone gets fed. Our master says as long as the Sun family has 1 grain of rice left, nobody goes hungry. People were sobbing into their bowls, calling me a living Buddha. Zhou spotted me in the center, standing under an umbrella, directing everything calmly. "Brother Sun," he called out. I turned around with just the right amount of surprise. "Magistrate Zhou?" In this rain. He looked at the whole operation, then at me, and asked the real question. Where did all this grain come from? I prepared my answer. I sighed and gave him a self-deprecating smile. I told him the truth, well, my version of it. I was a farmer's son, I said. Growing up poor left me paranoid. When I finally had money, I didn't trust banks or real estate. Only a full granary felt safe. So a few weeks ago, on impulse, I'd converted most of my spare cash into grain and stuffed it into rented warehouses around town. I'd felt stupid about it at the time. Who hoards grain when business is booming? Turned out to be the luckiest dumb decision I'd ever made. A newly rich farmer with deep insecurity about food, it made perfect sense. Zhou's last trace of suspicion melted away. He grabbed my shoulder, opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't find words. He just let out a long, heavy sigh. An old man shuffled over with his bowl and tried to kneel before us both, thanking Zhou and thanking me. Zhou caught him and helped him up. The old man cried and said without me opening my granaries, his whole family would have starved today. He called Zhou a good official and me a saint. The crowd joined in, a wave of genuine, desperate gratitude washing over us. Zhou's eyes went red. He knew the truth of his situation, his position, the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, all saved because of what he thought was my paranoid grain-hoarding habit. He pulled me aside and bowed deeply. Brother, I will never forget this debt. I pulled him up quickly. Between brothers, no need for that. Helping people in disaster was simply our duty. He studied my face for a long moment, then made his move. He lowered his voice. You've done something extraordinary here, saved an entire county. You're wasting yourself in business. I kept my expression neutral even as my heart started hammering. He told me the county's registrar position had been vacant for a long time. It wasn't a huge title, but it was the administrative hub of the county office. managing documents, official seals, coordinating between departments. Real power for someone who knew how to use it. He wanted to formally recommend me to the imperial court for the position. I put on my best flustered, overwhelmed face. I protested. I was just a commoner with no education, no scholarly background. It would break every rule. How could someone like me hold office? Zhou waved that away. Rules are dead. People are alive. What rule matters more than hundreds of thousands of lives? This is decided. If you refuse, you're telling me I'm not your brother. Zhou's announcement carried over the rain, and the crowd heard everything. The moment people realized he was offering me an official position, the place erupted. The old man who'd been kneeling earlier shoved his bowl into his grandchild's hands and dropped to his knees again, this time begging Zhou to follow through. Others joined in, shouting that I deserved it, that having me in office would be a blessing for the whole county. The voices piled up like waves, one over another. I looked at all those desperate, grateful faces and knew I couldn't play humble anymore. Refusing now would look fake. I stepped forward, helped Zhou up, and bowed deeply to the crowd. I told them I was just a farmer who'd gotten lucky in business, never imagined entering government. But seeing the county suffer like this cut me to the bone. If they and Magistrate Zhou believed in me, I'd accept the responsibility. I wouldn't promise miracles, just honest work, keeping people fed and safe. The cheering that followed drowned out the storm. After making sure the porridge stations would keep running smoothly, I rode home through the grateful crowds. Once inside my bedroom with the door shut, I started planning. The position was mine, but keeping it secure and making it comfortable required strategy. Zhou was my patron. That relationship needed reinforcing. We were brothers before. Now I'd be his subordinate. Time to strengthen the bond. Gifts, but not the obvious kind. Gold and silver would be too crude for a man like Zhou and could cause him political trouble. I opened the system shop and it practically read my mind, offering me 3 options tailored to the situation. 100-year-old wild ginseng for Zhou himself, showing care for his health. A set of snow silk scarves for his wife and daughters, warming up the back courtyard relationships. And a deluxe gift package of our store's best products for his wife, making her the trendiest woman in the county's social circles. I bought all 3, 170 taels total. The next day, when the rain eased up, I loaded everything onto a cart and went straight to Zhou's residence. He came out personally to greet me, then frowned when he saw the boxes being carried in. I handled it perfectly. The ginseng was for his health, not a bribe, just a brother looking out for a brother who'd been working himself sick over the disaster. The rest was just fun little novelties from my shop for his wife and daughters, nothing expensive, just to lift their spirits. He couldn't refuse without being rude. He shook his head, smiled, and accepted. We exchanged a look and both understood. Our alliance was now cemented at every level. News of my appointment spread across the county like wildfire. Some people were surprised, some jealous, but most approved. They'd all seen me feeding the hungry with my own grain. In the public's mind, I'd earned this. The biggest change hit my own household. Wanru came to me one afternoon looking flustered, holding a stack of gold-trimmed invitation cards. The county deputy's wife, the county captain's wife, the records officer's wife. Every important official's spouse in Qingyuan had sent her formal invitations to flower viewing parties and tea gatherings. This would have been unthinkable before. Wanru came from a merchant background. She'd never been allowed into the official's wives' circle. But now that I was about to become registrar, she was suddenly Madam's son, and everyone wanted to know her. She asked nervously which ones she should attend. I pulled her close and told her not to worry. They were inviting her to get close to me. She was the lady of the house. She could go wherever she pleased. After calming her down, I found Goxing waiting in my study with another mountain of invitations. These ones from officials, local gentry, and grain merchants, all wanting to host me for dinner. I took Wanru to Deputy Lu's dinner party first. He met us at the gate personally with his whole family, making a big show of it that turned heads among the other guests. Inside, Wanru got swarmed by the officials' wives, complimenting her skin, her elegance, asking about our store's products. She was nervous at first, but she's sharp, and she found her footing quickly, handling everyone with grace. She looked every bit the proper lady of a rising household. Meanwhile, Lu pulled me to the head table. A few rounds of drinks in, he sent the servants away and dropped his voice. He said we'd be colleagues soon and wanted to speak frankly. The bureaucracy was tangled. No one survives alone. Zhou was my backer, sure, but more friends meant more paths. I sipped my wine and waited for the real pitch. It came fast. He had a niece named Qianlei, just turned 15, pretty and well-mannered. She supposedly admired heroic men like me. Marriage alliance. The oldest trick in politics. Take his niece as a concubine, and his faction in the county office would be permanently tied to mine. I put on a reluctant face and said I already had wives and concubines. He waved that away. I was an official now. Multiple concubines were expected. Good for the family line. His niece would cause no trouble. I laughed inside. Once she entered my household, whether she caused trouble or not would be up to me, not her. But he had a point. I wasn't just a merchant anymore. The women in my household represented my political network. When someone offers you a free alliance, you take it. I stood, bowed, and accepted his generous offer. He was thrilled. He clapped his hands, and a girl in a pale yellow dress walked in. Slim, delicate face, shy and trembling. She bowed and called me, Master. On the ride home, Wanru glanced at the new addition sitting nervously beside her, then at my calm face, and sighed quietly. The next day, the county captain's banquet. Same script. After the wine flowed, his daughter's son Dan Yin was brought out. A spirited girl who supposedly admired my heroic reputation. I accepted. Day 3, the records officer's dinner. His daughter Li Changel, a scholarly type who carried a guqin. Another perfect match, he said. I accepted again. 3 days, 3 new concubines. My back courtyard was expanding fast. The funny side effect, the county's rival political factions, which used to despise each other, suddenly had something in common. They'd all married women into my household. Meetings at the county office got noticeably more polite. Word spread through my mansion quickly. The servants whispered that the master's abilities extended well beyond business. Every dinner outing produced a new beauty. But not everyone was happy about it. In her small side room, Xiaohe was losing her mind. She hadn't seen me in days. During the day, I was at banquets or inspecting the porridge stations. At night, my bedroom had a different woman every time. Li one night, Danyan the next, Changel after that. These were officials' daughters. Their status was leagues above a bought servant girl from a pleasure house. Xiaohe had thought she had the advantage of being early. She'd been with me before any of them. Her plan was to get pregnant fast and lock down her position. But now competitors were pouring in, each one more legitimate than she was. If this kept up, I'd forget she even existed. She touched her flat stomach and panic gripped her. She couldn't just sit and wait. Xiao Yu was useless. That cold girl just played her guqin and ignored everything. Xiaohe was on her own. She looked in the mirror, studied her still beautiful face, and made a plan. She headed straight to the kitchen and found Suohua, putting on her sweetest smile. She asked about the premium bird's nest that Magistrate Zhou had sent. She wanted to make me a special tonic, since I'd been working so hard lately. In the kitchen, Xiaohe carefully prepared a bowl of premium bird's nest soup. She dressed up for the occasion, a thin lavender dress that left little to imagination, a pearl hairpin, her brightest rouge. She was making her move. Suehua passed by and paused, looking her over. The master's status is different now. Be smart. Then she walked away. Xiaohe wasn't sure if that was advice or a warning, but she didn't care. If she did nothing, she'd disappear entirely in this household. Late that night, I was still in my study, bent over a map of Qingyuan County, marking areas for post-flood reconstruction. Zhou had handed me the whole disaster recovery operation, both a sign of trust and a test. I couldn't coast on porridge station glory forever. Then the scent hit me. Xiaohe glided in with her tray, knelt beside my leg, and looked up at me with those liquid eyes. She fed me the soup spoonful by spoonful, blowing on each one, pressing closer with every sip. By the time the bowl was empty, she was practically draped over me, whispering that it was late and she could help me rest. I didn't move, didn't push her away, didn't pull her close. Just sat there. The silence stretched. I could feel her confidence crumbling. When she was about to break, I spoke. These past few days, feeling insecure. One sentence and her whole act collapsed. She started crying. All the fear, jealousy, and frustration she'd been bottling up came pouring out. She sobbed that the new girls were officials' daughters, educated and well-born, while she was just a bought servant. She was terrified I'd forget her. I let her cry it out. Then I pulled her onto my lap, but not for what she expected. I patted her back like a child and told her the truth, even though it was harsh. There will be more women in this house. Always more. Competing for one night with me is a dead end. You bring soup tonight, someone plays a song tomorrow, another dances the day after. How many nights can you win? How long can you keep it up? She went still. I told her what I actually needed wasn't more women serving tea in the back courtyard. I needed capable people, real partners who could help me build something. Then I dropped the bomb. The county business was running smoothly. My next step was expanding to the prefecture capital, a city 10 times bigger with 10 times the opportunities, but also 10 times more dangerous. I needed someone I trusted to go there and set things up. I wanted her and Xiaoyu to go. She'd be the head manager of the Nanyang branch. Her own shop, her own staff, tens of thousands of taels flowing through her hands. Her brain short-circuited. She'd spent all her energy scheming for one more night in my bed, and here I was offering her an empire. I held her face and laid it out plainly. She was smart and ambitious. Wasting those qualities fighting with other women in a courtyard was beneath her. I didn't want my women turning into bitter, jealous housewives. Out in Nanyang, running a real business, commanding dozens of people, handling serious money. No official's daughter in this house would dare look down on her again. That lit the fire. Her tears dried instantly. Her cheeks flushed with excitement instead of shame. The fear and self-pity vanished, replaced by something fierce and hungry. She jumped off my lap and dropped to her knees. I'll do it. I'll go. I won't let you down. I helped her up and told her to prepare. She and Xiaoyu would leave in a few days. She practically ran out of the room, her back straight, her steps full of purpose. A completely different woman from the one who'd walked in with soup and seduction. I watched her go, tapping the desk. Xiaoyu was a racehorse. Point her in a direction and crack the whip, and she'd run full speed. But Xiaoyu was a different animal entirely. That quiet, cold girl. Would she be willing to leave this safe little courtyard and step into the unknown? 3 days later, the appointment letter arrived from the prefecture office. Goshing practically tumbled into my study, unable to contain himself. The county office had sent someone. I was to report immediately for my official installation. The whole mansion buzzed with excitement. Servants ran around telling each other, faces glowing with pride. I stayed calm. I'd been expecting this. Wanru came from the inner quarters carrying a brand new official robe, dark green with subtle cloud patterns stitched in darker thread. Understated but dignified. The registrar's uniform. She dressed me herself, smoothing every wrinkle, tying the jade belt at my waist with gentle, careful hands. When she stepped back and looked at me, her cheeks flushed pink. "You look wonderful," she said softly, eyes full of pride. At the county office, the main hall was packed. Zhou Wenhai presided, flanked by Deputy Liu, Captain Sun, Records Officer Li, and every official of any importance. The lower-ranked clerks lined both sides, craning their necks to see the new arrival. When I stepped down from my carriage in that green robe, the atmosphere shifted. Nobody was looking at a merchant anymore. I walked into the hall, and every clerk bowed in unison. "We greet Registrar Sun." Zhou came down the steps, took my hand, and led me to the center. He unrolled the yellow appointment scroll and read it aloud. For extraordinary merit during the flood, having opened his private granaries to save the people, Sun Yi was specially promoted to the position of county registrar, charged with managing documents and the official seal and assisting the magistrate in governing. He placed the scroll and a heavy bronze seal in my hands. The seal was cold, but its weight burned. This was power made physical. From this moment, I was no longer a commoner. I was a court-appointed official. The clerks bowed again, deeper this time, with real fear in their voices. Then came the politicking. Deputy Liu sidled up first, all smiles, congratulating me like we were family, which, technically, we now were. He leaned in and whispered about his niece Li, hoping she was settling in well, reminding me we were one family now. I smiled back perfectly. I acknowledged his niece's good character, said my wife liked her, then smoothly redirected everything back to public duty. We were all here to serve Magistrate Zhou and the people of Qingyuan. One big team. His smile froze for just a second before he recovered. County Captain Sun came next, blunt and direct, slapping my shoulder hard. He said he was glad to have someone competent handling paperwork, since his soldiers couldn't write their way out of a bag. That sounded friendly, but he was really probing whether I'd try to meddle in military affairs. I told him his job was charging into danger on the front lines, and mine was making sure the paperwork and supplies behind him were perfect. Supporting role, clearly defined, no overreach. He paused, then laughed loudly. He liked that answer. The other officials who'd been hovering, waiting to feel me out, pulled back. This new registrar was young but slippery, didn't lean toward any faction, gave nothing away, said all the right things without committing to anyone. After the ceremony, everyone left, except Joe. He called me to his private study. With the door closed, his warm public face disappeared. He looked serious, even grim. He reached deep into his desk and pulled out a thick, yellowed case file, dropping it heavily on the table in front of me. Registrar's son, this is your first assignment. He stared at that file with a hard expression. And the toughest bone you'll ever have to chew. The case file Joe handed me was about government relief money that had been sent down before the flood. The account book looked perfect. Every payment had a name, a village headman's thumbprint, neat and clean. The book's balance, Joe said, tapping the file. But my desk is buried in complaints. Countless flood victims say they never received a single coin. People starved to death. The man responsible was Zhang, the revenue clerk. He'd been in the county office over 20 years, left behind by the previous magistrate. Deep roots, slippery as an eel. Joe had tried pressing him several times, but got nowhere. Joe was handing me a hot potato. Investigate, and I'd make enemies among the entrenched old guard. Don't investigate, and I'd lose Joe's trust and my seat would crumble beneath me. I took the file. 3 days. You'll have your answer. Back in my office, I knew normal questioning would be useless against a veteran like Zhang. He'd have 100 ways to deflect. I needed an edge. I checked the system shop and found exactly what I needed. Micro-expression analysis, the ability to detect lies by reading split-second facial movements. 200 taels. I bought it instantly. Knowledge flooded my brain. Every facial muscle, every involuntary emotional response, cataloged and ready. I summoned Zhang. He waddled in with his goatee and friendly smile, bowing and scraping, offering to help with anything I needed. My new skill read him immediately, contempt hidden behind fake respect. Heart rate steady. This was a man who'd been wearing masks for decades. I pointed at the account book and asked about the relief payments. He nodded eagerly. Everything was documented, every coin accounted for. I told him many people said they'd never received money. He launched into a rehearsed speech, sighing dramatically about how the funds were distributed through village headmen, and some headmen must have pocketed the cash. Tragic, he said, but impossible to prevent. His department could only guarantee the paperwork was clean. My skill confirmed it. Lying, zero emotional fluctuation, a prepared excuse he'd practiced many times. I pretended to accept his explanation, then dropped my real move. I told him to summon every single village headman who'd signed for relief money. All of them, tomorrow morning, in the main hall. I'd verify the accounts face-to-face, one entry at a time. His smile froze for exactly 1 second. The system lit up. Fear. Pupils dilated in 0.2 seconds. Left corner of mouth dropped and recovered. Heart rate spiked 30%. Target in a state of high panic. He scrambled to talk me out of it. Too many people, too disruptive to farming, might cause unnecessary alarm. Every excuse he could grab. I leaned forward. So you're saying we should just let a messy account slide? For the sake of keeping things calm, he backpedaled desperately, stammering about needing more time to think it through. I cut him off. Tomorrow morning. Every headman on that list. In the main hall. Go prepare the roster. He tried to say more, but one look at my face shut him down. He backed out of the room bowing. The moment he turned around, his shirt was soaked through with sweat. After he left, I went back to the account book, page by page, under candlelight. One name caught my eye. Wong or Matsi, a village headman who appeared 5 times in the ledger, each time collecting relief money for 20 households. The total came to over 100 taels. That was the largest amount claimed by any single headman, and the most frequent appearances. Too suspicious. Did one village really have that many victims needing one man to collect for them? And looking closely at the thumbprints, they were all supposedly from the same person, but the pressure and angle varied slightly each time, like someone was deliberately imitating them. I called Goshing and sent him to find this Wong or Matsi in the Fuan neighborhood on the east side. Bring him quietly, no fuss. An hour later, Goshin came back. Alone. His face was white as a ghost. He dropped to his knees, teeth chattering. Master, that Wong or Matsi. He's dead. The neighbors all confirmed it. During the flood last month, his house was completely destroyed. Him, his wife, his children, 5 people total, all drowned. The bodies weren't found until days later, washed up downstream. A dead man had been signing for relief money. 5 times. A dead man's name appearing 5 times in the relief ledger, collecting the most money of any village headman. This was getting interesting. Goshing wanted to expose Zhang immediately, but I stopped him. If we showed our hand now, Zhang would just claim he didn't know Wang or Matsi had died, blame some underlings for fraud, take a slap on the wrist for oversight, and walk away clean. We'd get nothing. One dead man couldn't bring him down, but a living Wang or Matsi could. I told Goshing to forget everything he'd learned, act like the trip to Fuan never happened. Then I sent him to do something very specific. Go to the county office entrance, find a loud-voiced clerk, and have him publicly announce that Registrar Sun was summoning village headman Wang or Matsi for an accounting meeting tomorrow morning. The key part, make sure the revenue department heard it clearly. Goshing didn't understand, but he ran off to do it. I leaned back and pictured what would happen next. It took less than 15 minutes. In the revenue office, Zhang was sipping tea with his cronies when the announcement echoed through the corridor. His teacup hit the floor and shattered. He stood frozen, face drained of color. The other clerks stared at him. He stammered something about clumsy old hands and bent down to pick up the pieces, his fingers shaking so badly he nearly cut himself. My people reported every detail back to me. I sipped my own tea calmly. The fish had taken the bait. Now I just needed to see where the line led. I spent the evening having a relaxed dinner with Wanru and my 3 new concubines, chatting and laughing as if I didn't have a care in the world. Late that night, Goshing slipped back into my study, face bright with excitement. I had someone watching Zhang all evening. After he left the office, he went straight home. Then, not long after, Deputy Lu's personal steward entered Zhang's house through the back door. Deputy Lu, the smiling fox who'd pushed his niece into my household, the one who'd been so eager to make us family. Now everything clicked. Zhang was just the front man, the clerk who handled the dirty work. The real power behind this scheme, the one who could suppress investigations and make problems disappear, had to be someone at the deputy level. Lu had been running this operation, likely since the previous magistrate's time. When Zhou Wenhai took over and started asking questions, he couldn't touch these entrenched locals. They thought the danger had passed, until I came along and pried the lid back open. That's why they've been so aggressive about sending me women and building connections. They wanted to pull me into their circle, make me complicit, turn me into one of them. A clever political trap, but they'd miscalculated. I don't play by those rules. I asked how long Lu's steward stayed. About half an hour, Goshing said, and he left carrying a sizable package. A package, probably the real account books or banknotes, evidence being moved. My full plan was taking shape when suddenly, alarm gongs rang outside, and people started screaming. Fire! Fire at Clerk Zhang's house. Goshing's face went pale. I stood up without a trace of surprise. That was fast. Let's go see. By the time we arrived, Zhang's courtyard was blazing, specifically his study. The whole place lit up like daytime. Neighbors and bailiffs were hauling water buckets in chaos. Zhang sat on the ground nearby, hair wild, beating his chest and wailing about his precious books being destroyed. A lifetime of records, gone. I watched his performance with cold eyes and walked toward the ruins. A bailiff tried to stop me. I pushed past him. I activated my micro-expression skill and scanned everything. Zhang's crying was loud, but his face showed zero genuine grief. Instead, his eyes kept darting toward one corner of the burned study, with relief and nervous satisfaction. I walked to that exact spot and kicked aside a chartboard. Underneath was a half-burned account book. Most of it was ash, but one corner had been protected by the board and soaked by the firefighting water. Still partially readable. I picked it up with a handkerchief. The ink was mostly smeared, but 2 things stood out with perfect clarity. A red thumbprint pressed in cinnabar, and 3 shaky, but legible characters next to it, a name. Right at that moment, a sedan chair arrived with an escort. Deputy Lu stepped out, face grave and official. He surveyed the fire, glanced at Zhang on the ground, then fixed his eyes on me. "Registrar son, what brings you here so late?" I didn't answer. I just held out that charred scrap of paper. "Deputy Liu, would you take a look at this?" He leaned in. When he saw the thumbprint and the name on that burned page, his composure shattered like Zhang's teacup. Every drop of color drained from his face. In the county office's back room, behind closed doors, Zhou slammed that charred scrap of paper on the table and tore into Deputy Liu. How could he let his own clerk forge documents, steal relief money meant for dying people, and then set fire to the evidence? What kind of deputy was he? Liu stood there shaking like a leaf, sweat soaking through his green robe, stammering that he'd had no idea, that Zhang was an old holdover from the previous administration, that he'd trusted him blindly. I sat in my chair the whole time, saying nothing. I just picked up my tea, blew on it slowly, and took a sip. The contrast between Zhou's fury, Liu's panic, and my silence made the room feel suffocating. When I finally spoke, Liu flinched like he'd been struck. I stated it plainly. Zhang was his man. The forged thumbprint of Wang Ermatzi was nearly flawless. That kind of skilled fraud didn't happen without years of practice. Someone that talented must have been quite useful to the deputy over the years. That wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, and Liu knew it. Everything from my summoning a dead man to the conveniently timed fire, it had all been a trap designed specifically for him. There was nothing left to argue. His face twitched. He looked at me, young, calm, unmoved, and I could see the chill run through his entire body. He dropped to his knees, not just to Zhou, but to both of us. He confessed, blamed it on being foolish, on being deceived by Zhang, begged for a chance to make things right. I stood up and helped him to his feet myself. That surprised him more than anything. I told him the past was the past. If we investigated every person involved, we'd have to replace half the county's staff, and that would cripple the recovery effort. As long as he repaid every stolen coin, made sure the cheated families got their money, and never let this happen again, we could handle it quietly. He nearly collapsed with relief. He agreed to everything instantly. He'd cover every missing tail from his own pocket, not a single coin short. But he was smart enough to know that just paying back the money wasn't enough to prove his loyalty. He disappeared for a moment and came back carrying a cloth-wrapped package. Inside wasn't gold or silver. It was an old account book. He handed it to me, not to Zhou, and explained what it contained. Years of records showing how several of the county's wealthiest families had colluded with former officials to seize farmers' land and evade taxes. Every entry backed by evidence. Zhou stood there stunned. Liu was handing over an intelligence bomb, selling out half the county's elite as his pledge of allegiance. To me, Liu smiled his most ingratiating smile and said this was a gift from himself and his niece Lei. Whatever I needed in the future, he was at my service. I took the ledger. It was heavy in more ways than one. Every page was a thread in a vast web connecting the county's underground power structure. Names, numbers, deals, all laid bare. After Liu stumbled out, terrified but breathing easier, Zhou and I were alone. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. "Brother, you broke that old fox without raising a single weapon." I couldn't have done it. He paced excitedly with the black ledger, saying that with this book in my possession, the county's politics could finally be cleaned up. The local power brokers would never dare defy us again. I walked to the window and looked at the sky outside the county office. Clean politics? That was a nice thought. But we had a very long way to go. Liu's surrender changed the county's political landscape overnight. 3 days later, at the regular staff meeting, the atmosphere was completely different. Zhou sat at the top, flanked by Deputy Liu and Captain Sun, with me and records officer Li below them. Normally these meetings were lazy affairs, routine reports, tea drinking, time killing. But today everyone could feel something coming. Liu especially. He sat stiff and serious, no trace of his usual laziness, sneaking nervous glances at me whenever he thought I wasn't looking. Zhou opened with the standard talk about post-flood recovery, relief, rebuilding, the usual. The room went silent. Everyone knew it was a mess, and nobody wanted to volunteer. That's when I stood up. I told them rebuilding couldn't just be about patching things up. We needed to use this crisis as a chance to cut deep and fix what was really broken. My proposal: under the cover of verifying flood victims' identities, we'd conduct a complete land survey of the entire county, measure every field, count every person, and use the results to reform the tax system. The room gasped like I'd dropped a bomb. Records Officer Lee, the father of my concubine Changle, jumped to his feet, face red, practically shouting. He called it reckless, said land surveys had caused rebellions throughout history, that the county had just survived a disaster, and people needed stability, not upheaval. I was trying to push the county into the fire, he said. Others piled on immediately. Too dangerous, too fast, the harvest comes first, let's not rock the boat. The opposition nearly drowned me out. Joe looked worried. He hadn't expected me to lead with something this explosive. I waited for the noise to die down. Then I calmly pulled a single sheet of paper from my sleeve, one page from Lou's black ledger, and placed it on the desk in front of me. I didn't unfold it, just pressed it down with my knuckle. Lee stopped talking mid-sentence. Every veteran official in the room who knew how things really worked felt their stomachs drop. I acknowledged Lee's concerns politely. Then I reframed the argument. When powerful families own 1,000 acres but only pay taxes on 100, the government treasury never fills up. When refugees have no land to farm while wealthy families sit on overflowing granaries, that's the real cause of rebellion, not land surveys. Then I pivoted. I said this couldn't be done with a blunt axe. Families who genuinely contributed to the county shouldn't be harmed. Some people in the room exhaled. I laid out my offer. Any landowner who cooperated with the survey and voluntarily leased their hidden excess land to homeless refugees at fair prices would receive business tax reductions from the government going forward. I looked directly at Captain Sun and Deputy Liu. The captain's escort agency paid heavy taxes every year. Liu's fabric business operated across the whole prefecture. Surely both of them could use some tax relief? Captain Sun jumped on it immediately. He was a straightforward man. Tax cuts were something he understood. He declared my plan was fair and reasonable, and his family would cooperate first. Every eye turned to Liu. He was the biggest official landowner besides Zhou. His choice would decide everything. Sweat rolled down his fat face. He knew exactly what that sheet of paper on my desk represented. Today it was leverage. Tomorrow it could be a death warrant. He slapped his thigh and stood up, voice booming even louder than the captain's. He called my plan brilliant and compassionate, pledged full cooperation, and swore his family would report every acre honestly. 2 of the 3 power players had flipped to my side in seconds. The officials who'd been backing Lee went mute, heads down, afraid to breathe. Lee stood there alone, face cycling from purple to white, staring at me like I was some kind of monster. This hadn't been a meeting. It had been an ambush planned from the start, and he'd walked right into it. After everyone filed out, Zhou grabbed my hand, face flushed with excitement. He called my strategy masterful: divide, recruit, reward, and threaten, all in one move. With Liu and Sun leading the way, the land survey was already half accomplished. If we pulled this off, it would be the biggest political achievement the county had seen in decades. I walked to the window and looked out at the rooftops of the wealthy estates beyond the county walls. Zhou's enthusiasm was premature. Today's victory was just the opening move. The real resistance would come from the people who weren't even in that room. The local gentry who controlled 80% of the county's land and wealth. Getting them to give back what they'd swallowed would take more than clever politics and veiled threats. I needed a sharper blade. Just as I'd expected, winning the meeting was the easy part. Once the order left the county office, it became worthless paper. For 3 days straight, the bailiffs I sent to survey farmland came back empty-handed and humiliated. Wong family village. The village elders lined up old women to block the road, lying on the ground, daring my men to step over them. Lee family manor. They banged drums and gongs, called us land thieves, and sent out every able-bodied man with hoes and clubs. Zhang family stockade. The headman pretended to be sick, nobody would talk, and every path they were shown led to barren wilderness. The gentry were playing their classic game. Never confront you openly, just make every step impossible with dirty tricks and delays. I could send Captain Sun's soldiers, but that was the worst possible move. The moment troops marched into villages, the whole thing would turn into a crackdown story. The gentry would stir up the farmers, blame everything on the county government, and I'd be the villain. This bone was harder to crack than I'd thought. I sent everyone away and sat alone in my office until dark. Walking through the mansion that night, trying to clear my head, I heard a sharp whistle of wind cutting through air. In the moonlit courtyard, A figure was drilling with a long spear, fast, precise, powerful. Silver arcs of steel flashing under the moon, dust swirling at her feet. It was Sun Danyan, Captain Sun's daughter. She wore a tight martial outfit that showed off her tall, athletic frame, hair pulled into a high ponytail whipping behind her. No softness, no coyness, just pure, striking confidence. I stopped under the covered walkway and watched. I'd known she could fight, but her spear work was genuinely impressive, sharp as her father's, but quicker and more fluid. She finished, planted her spear, and spotted me. No blushing, no fluttering. She walked over and gave me a fighter's salute. Then she did something none of my other women had ever done. She asked me directly if the land survey was giving me trouble. I was actually surprised. Wanru managed the household. The Lu sisters were gentle and obedient. Lai was quiet and bookish. None of them ever touched my official work. Danyan was the first. She'd heard everything through her father's soldiers, local men who knew what was happening in the villages. She told me straight, bailiffs were too low-ranking to handle this. They couldn't intimidate anyone. And her father's county garrison was full of lazy veterans who'd either slack off or secretly side with the gentry. Her analysis was razor-sharp. This woman had brains to match her spear. Then she offered her solution. She had a team, a group of women she'd befriended during her years traveling as a martial artist. They'd followed her to Qingyuan and formed a female escort company, taking jobs guarding wealthy women on the road. They were tough, experienced, and had seen every kind of trouble. Her plan: form a women's outreach and security team. On the surface, they'd go to villages to promote the new policies and help women and children, a soft approach that wouldn't trigger the same defensive reaction as male bailiffs. But if anyone tried to start trouble, her fighters could handle it on the spot. They were outsiders with no local ties, so they had no reason to go easy on anyone. Knock down a few ringleaders, and the rest would fall in line. It was bold, unconventional, and hit the problem exactly where it needed to be hit. An armed force outside the official system, doing the dirtiest work with no political baggage. This was exactly the sharp blade I'd been looking for. I approved it immediately. Full authority. Whatever she needed, funding, official papers, free movement across the county, she just had to ask. She only wanted one thing: a written order from me authorizing her team to operate freely and act at their discretion anywhere in the county. Done. She saluted, turned on her heel, and marched off to assemble her people. No hesitation, no wasted words. I stood in the courtyard feeling like I'd struck gold. Lai for administration and paperwork potential. Danyan for muscle and strategy. My back courtyard was turning into a treasure chest. Then a maid came running through the garden with a lantern, panicked. "Master, concubine Lu, she's going into labor." Lu Mei was in labor. Everything about land surveys and politics vanished from my head as I rushed to her courtyard. The place was lit up bright, buzzing with activity. Wanru was standing in the corridor directing everything. Maids carrying hot water in, bloody water out, managing the chaos with calm efficiency. She told me it had been over an hour already, and from the sounds inside, things weren't going smoothly. I stood at the door and listened. Lu Mei was fighting hard, barely letting herself cry out, swallowing the pain. Her sister Lulan was inside with her, along with the midwife, who kept shouting encouragement. She could see the baby's head, just one more push. My system had medical knowledge, but childbirth was its own kind of danger. There was nothing I could do but wait with everyone else. Another half hour crawled by. Just when I was about to break down the door myself, a powerful cry split the night air, loud, healthy, full of life. The midwife came out beaming, holding a bundled baby. "Congratulations, master. Mother and son both safe." A big, healthy boy. Wanru took the baby first, checked him over, then brought him to me. I looked down at that wrinkled little face and could already see something of myself in his features. Then the system chimed with something that made my heart slam against my ribs. A new reward: high-precision sandbox simulation system. It could take any area I specified and create a perfect three-dimensional light map. Terrain, population, power structures, resources, everything. I could run simulations on it, predict outcomes, and find the best strategy for any situation. This was made for my land survey problem. The whole reason the gentry were winning was information. They knew every inch of their territory while the government was stumbling blind. With this sandbox, the entire county would be transparent to me. Wanru reminded me to name the boy. I was still buzzing with excitement. The name came instantly, Sun Guangzhu, glory to the ancestors. After making sure Lu Mei was resting comfortably, I handed the baby to Wanru and rushed back to my study. I locked the door, stood in the center of the room, and activated the system. Golden light threads wove through the air, crisscrossing and filling in details at incredible speed. Within seconds, a massive holographic map covered my entire floor: mountains, rivers, towns, villages, the complete geography of Qingyuan County reproduced in perfect detail. Data layers loaded on top. Population, farmland, local power structures. Colored dots appeared everywhere. White for towns, gray for common people, and the ones I cared about most, the gentry's influence zones, ranging from yellow for minor players to deep red for the most powerful. The county's entire underground network was laid bare before my eyes. Which villages were hard targets, which landowners could be recruited, which spots were easy pickings, all instantly clear. I placed Danyan's women's team on the map as blue dots and started running simulations. I sent them toward various villages and watched what happened. Most yellow and orange zones gave them trouble, but nothing they couldn't handle. Their fighting skills were enough to push through resistance. Then I moved them toward a deep red zone. The simulation changed dramatically. Red dots representing armed household guards swarmed the blue team from all sides. The area glowed so intensely it nearly swallowed the whole village. The system's verdict: 95% chance of mission failure. I zoomed in on that red zone. Every road, every building, even the hidden lookout post under the old tree at the village entrance, all rendered in perfect clarity. The village name appeared. It was Records Officer Li's ancestral hometown. The same Li who'd opposed me loudest at the meeting. The same Li whose daughter Chang'e was now my concubine. I stared at that fortified clan compound on the map. So the first example needs to be made right here. The chicken that gets slaughtered to scare the monkeys. It's going to be Li's own family. In my study, I pulled up the sandbox map and zoomed in on Li family village, the deep red zone that had beaten my simulation. The data scrolled past. 372 households, nearly 2,000 people, 47 armed guards, 12 elite enforcers, and over 300 men who could be called up to fight. The clan leader was Li Dushing, Records Officer Li's cousin. The muscle was run by Li Sanggu, the leader's nephew, a local bully who terrorized everyone around. I tracked Sanggu's daily routine on the map. Every morning, he patrolled the village. Late morning, he'd drink at a widow's tavern on the east side. Noon, he ate at home. Afternoon, he'd hang around the gambling den on the west side. Predictable as clockwork. Direct assault was out. 300 armed farmers plus guards meant any large-scale clash would spiral out of control. Bribery was impossible. The village was sealed tight. Outsiders couldn't even get in. I ran simulation after simulation on the map, testing routes, rejecting them one after another. Finally, my fingers settled on 3 key points: the village entrance, the well, and the ancestral hall. Divide, disrupt, strike surgically. I called Danyan to my study. When she walked in and saw the glowing holographic map covering the floor, she froze. I didn't explain it, just pointed at Li Village and laid out every detail. 3 teams. Team 1 would disguise themselves as farm women visiting relatives. They'd enter from the east, head to the tavern at late morning when Sanggu was drinking and his guard was lowest, and take him and his top enforcers down in one move. Team 2 would pose as traveling peddlers, enter from the south, and seize the village well, the one place everyone visited daily. Their job was to spread a single message. The county government had sent relief money for widows and orphans, but the Li clan had stolen it all. Team 3, her main force, would hide in the woods north of the village. Once Sanggu was captured and the stolen money rumor had the village in chaos, they'd strike the ancestral hall and grab clan leader Li Dushing. The clan's land deeds and secret account books were hidden in a compartment behind the fake mountain rock in the hall's back garden. Danyan listened to the whole plan, and I watched her expression shift from shock to complete admiration. She asked only one question: why late morning for the strike? Because that's when the working-age men were out in the fields, leaving mostly women, children, and elderly in the village. And Sanggu would be drunk, at his least alert. She saluted me like a soldier and left without another word. An hour later, over 30 women slipped out of the county seat. They wore rough peasant clothes, headbands, faces smudged with dirt, looking like the most ordinary village women you'd ever see. But buried deep inside their wicker baskets, wrapped in cloth, were gleaming weapons. At Lee Village, everything matched my sandbox perfectly. Over 100 men with hoes and clubs blocked the road. Sangu stood at the front, barrel-chested, shirt open, chewing a grass stem, eyeing Dan Yin and her women with a disgusting leer. Well, where are all you pretty ladies headed? His men laughed behind him. Dan Yin played her part flawlessly. She put on a timid, frightened face and said they were from a neighboring village, heading to the county seat to find relatives, just wanted to pass through and maybe get some water. Senga got cruder, suggesting the women come inside for drinks instead. When Dan Yin politely declined, he reached for her face. She sidestepped smoothly, but didn't strike. Not yet. Instead, following the plan exactly, she dropped to the ground and burst into loud, wailing sobs. There's no justice. The government won't help us, and now the villagers won't even let us pass. Every woman behind her started crying too. The village entrance turned into a wall of weeping, screaming women. Through her tears, Dan Yin shouted that they were war widows depending on government relief money to survive, but corrupt officials had been tricked by wealthy local families who'd pocketed the funds. They just wanted to go to the county seat and beg for fairness. Why wouldn't anyone let them through? The men were stunned. They were ready for a fight, skilled at intimidation, but a mob of sobbing, hysterical women sitting on the ground was something they had no playbook for. Village women and children drifted over to watch, whispering among themselves. Stolen relief money? Is that true? They sound like they really mean it. Sanga's face darkened. He'd expected these women to scatter at the first shout. Instead, they were making him look like a monster in front of his own villagers. He screamed at them to shut up, threatened to drag them all to the ancestral hall. But the crying only got louder. He turned to his men with a smug grin, thinking he still had control. See? With women, you just have to be meaner than they are. At the exact moment his guard dropped to zero, mid-laugh, mid-boast, completely distracted, Dan Yin's sobs cut off, and her right hand flashed a signal behind her back. The moment Dan Yin's hand flashed that signal, everything changed. 30 women who'd been sobbing on the ground exploded into action, synchronized, lightning fast, nothing soft about them anymore. Short sticks came out of baskets, leather whips off waists. They formed a loose but deliberate formation and crashed into the stunned mob of village men like a gray wave. The screaming started immediately. These bullies who'd terrorized the countryside had never faced anything like this. Their hoes and clubs were useless against fighters who targeted knees, wrists, and ankles with surgical precision. The whips snaked in from impossible angles, wrapping around limbs and yanking men off their feet. 15 breaths. That's all it took. Over half the 100-plus defenders were on the ground. The rest broke and ran screaming into the village. Sangu stood frozen, watching his invincible army crumble. Before he could think, Dan Yin was already in his face. He swung his club. She punched straight through it, snapping the wood in half. The impact split his palm open. Her second move locked his wrist and twisted. I heard bones pop even from the sandbox replay I'd been watching. He screamed something inhuman. A sweep kick dropped him to his knees, and she had him trussed up in rope before he hit the ground. 3 moves. Start to finish. With the leader captured, the remaining fighters scattered. Dan Yin split her forces exactly as I'd planned. One team held the village entrance. Another swept through the tavern and gambling den, rounding up Sangu's remaining enforcers. The main force charged straight for the ancestral hall. Meanwhile, the peddler team at the well had done their job perfectly. The rumor spread like wildfire. The county had sent relief money, but clan leader Li Dushing had pocketed every coin. That's why they'd been blocking officials from entering the village. The reaction was instant. Widows and orphans who'd been starving rushed out first, then more villagers who'd been squeezed by the clan for years. An angry river of people surged toward the ancestral hall. By the time Dan Yin's main force arrived, the hall was already surrounded by furious villagers screaming for their stolen money. Li Dushing and his guards were trapped inside with no escape. Dan Yin ignored the chaos and went straight to the back garden. She found the fake mountain rock, felt around for the mechanism, and pressed it. The rock slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment packed with account books and This was the real prize: 12 military-grade crossbows and 300 iron-tipped arrows. The account books were exactly what I'd predicted, dual ledger books. One showed a few hundred acres reported to the government. The other recorded over 3,700 hidden acres the Li clan had been farming tax-free. Evidence. All of it. People, paper, weapons. News of a women's squad taking down Li village swept the entire county in under an hour. Every landowner who'd been playing games with my surveyors suddenly went quiet, terrified. Back at the county office, Records Officer Li burst into the back hall screaming for Zhou's help. He pointed at me and practically foamed at the mouth. I'd used private soldiers, raided civilian homes, attacked his ancestral hall, injured dozens of his clansmen. He called me no better than a bandit and demanded I be stripped of office and arrested. Zhou looked uncomfortable. He hadn't expected things to escalate this far. Li's argument about procedure had some weight. I hadn't used official forces, after all. He turned to me carefully and asked if perhaps I'd been too hasty. Before I could answer, the door flew open. Dan Yin strode in with two of her fighters dragging the bound, gagged Sengu behind her. She dumped the stack of dual account books and a pile of gleaming military crossbows on the floor with a crash. Her report was crisp and emotionless. Her outreach team had encountered violent resistance. Over 100 armed men tried to attack government personnel. They defended themselves and made arrests. During the search, they discovered forged land records hiding 3,700 acres from taxation, plus 12 illegally stockpiled military crossbows and 300 armor-piercing arrows. Every word landed like a hammer on Li's chest. Hidden land was a serious crime. Private military weapons? That was treason. Li stared at the evidence on the floor, then at his nephew lying there like a trussed pig. His face went from red to gray. Everything was over. Zhou jumped up and examined the ledgers and weapons himself, hands trembling. I stood, walked to the center of the hall, and faced Li calmly. Records Officer Li, do you have anything else to say? His lips moved, but nothing came out. His legs gave way, and he collapsed to the floor. I turned to Zhou and bowed formally. Li had conspired with his clan to hide land, evade taxes on a massive scale, violently resist government authority, and stockpile military weapons, an act of rebellion. Every charge carried the death penalty. I requested his immediate arrest. The hall went dead silent. Nobody breathed. Zhou slammed his gavel. Guards, arrest the criminal Li Wenyuan and throw him in the death cell. The chicken had been slaughtered. Every monkey in the county was watching. Li collapsed on the floor like a puddle of mud, making mindless noises, completely broken. Zhou stood gripping the dual ledger, so hard his knuckles went white, chest heaving. I could read his face, shock, anger, but mostly fear. He'd been running this county without knowing a time bomb was buried underneath him. Hidden land, illegal weapons. Any one of these could have ended his career or worse. If the court had discovered this before he did, his whole family might have lost their heads. He ordered Li and Senga dragged to the death cells immediately, no visitors allowed. As they hauled Li toward the door, he snapped back to life and twisted around, fixing me with a poisonous glare. He screamed that I'd die badly, that his family's ghosts would haunt me forever. I didn't even bother looking up. He'd only ever been a stepping stone for me, and now that stone was crushed. Zhou studied Dan Yin and her fighters with new eyes, clearly recalculating just how much power I actually wielded. He asked who they were. I told him with a straight face, a women's outreach and security team I'd formed to promote new policies and protect government staff. Today they'd risked their lives defending official authority. Zhou saw right through it. These were trained soldiers, not community outreach workers. But he didn't challenge the fiction. Instead, he praised them as heroines of the county and ordered 100 taels from the treasury as their reward. After Danyan's team withdrew, it was just the two of us. Zhou sighed deeply and dropped the formal titles, calling me brother again. I underestimated you, he said. You punched a hole in the sky, then patched it yourself. The Li clan terrorized this county for decades. Previous magistrates couldn't touch them. You've been in office less than a month and ripped them out by the roots. He clapped my shoulder hard. But I like it. This county's politics needed exactly this kind of shaking up. I knew my gamble had paid off. Zhou wasn't angry about me acting independently. He was grateful. I was now his true inner circle. I steered the conversation back to business. With Li gone and his village exposed, The land survey should go much smoother now. Zhou practically glowed. Smooth? Those landowners who were stalling will be begging us to come measure their fields within 3 days. It happened even faster than he predicted. By that same afternoon, news of Li's arrest and the raid on Li village had swept every corner of the county. Total shock. The gentry who'd been secretly coordinating resistance couldn't understand how an impenetrable fortress like Li village had been dismantled by a group of women in under an hour. They didn't know what kind of monster this new registrar was, but they knew one thing. The chicken that got slaughtered was enormous, and every monkey had gotten the message. By evening, the county office entrance was mobbed. Village chiefs and clan leaders who'd spit on my bailiffs just days ago were now lined up with expensive gifts, smiling and bowing, desperate to see me. I refused every single one. Goshing delivered my message at the gate. Registrar's son says land surveying is public business, not personal. If you're sincere about cooperating, have your land deeds and household records ready at your village entrance tomorrow morning when the surveyors arrive. That drove them crazy. I wouldn't take bribes, wouldn't accept flattery, wouldn't even meet with them. The only option left was complete obedience. The next morning, something extraordinary happened across every village in the county. Clan leaders and headmen were standing at their village gates in their best clothes before dawn, holding their account books and land deeds, anxiously waiting for the government surveyors to arrive. When the bailiffs appeared on the road, these same people who'd blocked them with mobs and old women a week ago came running out to greet them. Sir, we've been waiting for you. Please, come to our hall for tea. Here are all our records. Every acre, completely honest, not a single number inflated. My bailiffs, the same men who'd been chased out with brooms, suddenly walked with their chests out, feeling 10 feet tall. They all knew who'd made this possible. The survey moved at incredible speed. Hidden fields that couldn't be found before were now being pointed out voluntarily. Fake population numbers were corrected without argument. In just 10 days, the majority of the county's land survey was complete. Zhou burst into my office one day waving a freshly compiled report, face red with excitement. Look at this. The verified total is 123,700 acres, nearly 50,000 more than the old records showed. That meant the county's annual tax revenue would essentially double. A monumental achievement for any official's career. Zhou grabbed my hands, practically shaking. You're my lucky star. When we report this to the prefecture, our futures are limitless, I smiled. The first step was done, and done solidly. The next challenge was using all this newly documented land and revenue to actually improve people's lives. But before that, I figured I'd earned a break. I'd been wound tight for weeks. Besides, those 3 officials' daughters I'd brought home recently, I realized I'd barely gotten to know them properly yet. With the land survey running smoothly, the remaining work was just paperwork that my staff could handle. I finally gave myself a few days off and slipped right back into the lazy rich man's life, sleeping until late morning, lounging under the grape trellis in the back garden, while he fed me peeled grapes, and Xiaoyu played her Gucci nearby. This was living. Then Suehua came over and told me the 3 officials' daughters were waiting in the main hall, hoping to spend some time with me. Right, I'd almost forgotten about them. Between the land survey crisis and the Li village raid, I'd barely spoken to any of them since their wedding nights. Now that I was free, they were naturally getting restless. I told Suehua I'd be there after changing. The scene in the hall was awkward. Qianlei, Sun Danyan, and Li Changel sat in 3 separate corners, drinking tea in silence. Li fidgeted with her sleeve. Danyan munched on pastries like nothing was wrong. And Changel, her father had just been thrown into a death cell by my hand, sat there white-faced, barely breathing, feeling lower than a servant. I walked in smiling and asked what brought them all together. Danyan, blunt as always, came right out with it. Now that I had some free time, maybe it was their turn to be with me? Lei turned crimson. Changel flinched. I laughed and told them they were all my women. No need for turns or formalities. Then I gave each of them a real purpose. Lei was good with needlework, so I put her in charge of all the household sewing, seasonal clothes for the staff, that sort of thing. A small job, but it told her she mattered to me. She accepted gratefully. Danyan lit up like a bonfire when I made her head trainer for all the mansion's guards and servants. No more embroidery for her. She'd be whipping lazy men into shape. She slapped her chest and promised me a fighting force within a month. Changel was the hardest. She sat there trembling, waiting for punishment or humiliation. Instead, I told her plainly. Her father's crimes were public business and had nothing to do with her. She was my wife now, and the past was the past. Then I gave her the most honorable role I could think of. When my children were old enough to start learning, she would be their teacher. Her literary talents would shape the next generation of the Sun family. Her eyes went red instantly. She stood, bowed deeply, and could barely choke out her thanks through tears. 3 women, 3 conversations, 3 problems solved. None of them would be sitting idle in the back courtyard breeding jealousy. Each one had a role that matched her strengths and gave her a sense of worth. After they left, my thoughts drifted to Xia He and Xiao Yu again. I'd already talked to Xia He about the prefecture city plan, and she was burning to go. The county business was stable now, the brand was established. It was time to think bigger. Nanyang Prefecture was the real prize, 10 times the size of our little county, teeming with wealthy customers and opportunity. But as an official, I couldn't be seen running a shop personally anymore. Sending 2 trusted, capable women to open a branch, there was the perfect solution. Xia He had the drive and the street smarts. Keeping her cooped up in the back courtyard would only waste her spark. Xiao Yu was cool-headed and detail-oriented, the perfect balance for Xia He's impulsiveness. One handling the outside, one managing the inside. The more I thought about it, the better it sounded. I decided to call them both to my study that evening and lay out the full plan. I was curious to see how they'd react, especially Xiao Yu, who'd never shown ambition for anything beyond her quiet corner and her guqin. Late at night, I sat in my study planning the Nanyang expansion. The county market had a visible ceiling. To build a real commercial empire, I had to go bigger. The prefecture capital was the political and economic heart of the entire region. Planting my flag there would bring serious wealth and connect me to higher-level power players who could help my career. I called Xia He and Xiao Yu in. Xia He walked in glowing. Ever since our night together, she looked at me with open warmth and eagerness. Xiao Yu was her usual quiet self, eyes down, seeming detached from everything. I told them straight. This was business, not pleasure. The county store was doing well, but Qingyuan was too small for my ambitions. My target was Nanyang Prefecture, maybe even the capital someday. Xia He's breath caught. Xiao Yu actually lifted her head in surprise. I laid out the plan. I was opening a branch in Nanyang, but Goshing needed to stay here running the county operation, and as an official, I couldn't be seen personally managing a business. So I was sending them. Both of them said us at the same time, Xia He with excitement, Xiao Yu with shock. I gave them the details. 1,000 taels of startup money, reliable staff to take along, and full authority over everything. Finding a location, renovation, stocking, opening. All of it in their hands. Xia He would be the head manager, handling all external dealings. She was sharp, socially skilled, and knew how to read people. Xiao Yu would manage the books and internal operations. Her calm, careful nature would balance Xia He's boldness perfectly. Xia He's brain practically exploded with joy. Running a major shop in a big city beat fighting over bedroom time in the back courtyard by 1,000 miles. Xiao Yu froze. She'd never imagined leaving this quiet courtyard. She wanted to spend her life playing music and reading books in a safe corner. The outside world terrified her. I could see her hesitation. She mumbled that she was afraid she wasn't capable enough and would disappoint me. I told her that wasn't her call to make. It was mine. I'd chosen her because I believed in her. Then I pushed harder. I asked what she thought would happen if she stayed in the back courtyard forever. Right now I was protecting her, and life was comfortable. But what if someday I wasn't there? What could she do besides play the guqin? How would she survive in this world on her own? That hit her hard. I could see it land. Her whole sense of safety was built on my protection. She was a caged bird who'd forgotten how to fly. I told her this wasn't just about opening a shop. I wanted them to learn real skills, to become women who could stand on their own feet. When they had tens of thousands of taels flowing through their hands and dozens of people working under them, they'd be their own safety net. That kind of independence and dignity couldn't be taken away by anyone. Xia He was practically vibrating. She kicked Xiao Yu under the table twice, trying to shake sense into her. Xia He jumped up first, dropped to her knees, and declared she was ready to go. She'd make the Nanyang branch a roaring success and never shame my name. All eyes turned to Xiao Yu. She was fighting a war inside, comfort and quiet on one side, a terrifying but transformative new world on the other. She looked at my eyes, then at Xiaohi kneeling beside her. And something shifted. She understood what I was really offering. Not just a job, but a path to becoming someone who didn't need to depend on any man to survive. She stood, knelt beside Xiaohi, and said quietly, "I'm willing to." Her voice still trembled. But her eyes were steady, more certain than I'd ever seen them. The plan was set, and the whole household kicked into gear preparing for the Nanyang branch. I gave Xiaohi and Xiaoyu 1,000 taels and bank notes and picked 4 of our sharpest, most reliable staff to go with them. Xiaohi transformed overnight. The back courtyard concubine disappeared and a driven businesswoman emerged. She grabbed Xiaoyu and went through every product we carried, categories, prices, profit margins, compiling a thick reference book. Then she cornered Goshing and squeezed every bit of shop management knowledge out of him, from daily operations to handling employees. Even Goshing was impressed, telling me privately that he was a natural-born merchant. Xiaoyu changed too, quietly but noticeably. She put down the guqin and picked up an account ledger instead, sitting with our bookkeeper learning numbers from scratch. She had real talent for it. Within days, she understood most of the accounting system. Watching both of them grow made me confident I'd made the right call. Before we left, Wanru called the 2 girls to her room. She told them that in the prefecture, they'd represent the Sun family name, and they needed to think carefully before acting. She asked Xiaoyu to keep an eye on Xiaohi's impulsiveness. Then she did something that surprised everyone. She slipped off a fine jade bracelet from her own wrist and pressed it into Xiaohi's hand. "Take it. If you ever need emergency money on the road, it'll help. You're out there working for this family, and I'm back here making sure the home front is solid so you have nothing to worry about." Both girls were stunned. They tried to refuse, but Wanru wouldn't hear it. They knelt and gave her a sincere bow of gratitude. That moment told me Wanru understood exactly what kind of leader a household needed. Generous, steady, and big-hearted enough to support even potential rivals. The next morning, 2 carriages lined up at the gate. I rode with Xiaohi and Xiaoyu in one. The 4 staff members and luggage went in the other. I wanted to escort them personally, partly because I didn't feel comfortable sending 2 young women on such a long trip alone, partly because I wanted to scout the Nanyang market myself and help choose a location. Goshing saw us off, thumping his chest and promising to hold down the fort. Inside the carriage, the girls sat stiffly at first, nervous and excited in equal measure. I leaned back and pretended to sleep. They gradually loosened up, peeking through the curtain at the countryside, whispering to each other about the spring fields and the farmers working. Like caged birds seeing open sky for the first time. I wasn't really sleeping. Hearing them chatter made me smile. Getting them out of that courtyard was definitely the right move. At midday, we stopped at a roadside tea house to rest. I found us a clean table. The place was noisy, traveling merchants and rough-looking men everywhere. Then trouble found us. A group of big, mean-looking men at the next table spotted Xiaohi and Xiaoyu. A bearded one called out loudly about what pretty girls they were, grinning with his buddies. Both girls went pale and pressed closer to me. I was about to handle it myself when Xiaohi suddenly stepped out from behind me. She took a breath, put on a sweet smile, and curtsied to the men. She told them they looked like well-traveled heroes, then casually dropped that we were servants of the Sun family from Nanyang Prefecture, and that our master had close connections with several officials at the prefectural government. She delivered it perfectly, polite but firm, no fear in her voice, a clear warning wrapped in flattery. She didn't threaten. She didn't beg. She just made them do the math. The bearded man's grin stiffened. They'd never heard of a Sun family, but anyone connected to prefecture officials was way above their pay grade. Didn't realize you were from Master Sun's household. Our apologies. His tone shifted completely. Xiaohi curtsied again, said they shouldn't let us disturb their meal, and smoothly guided the still stunned Xiaoyu back to our table. Crisis resolved without a single raised voice. I looked at her with genuine admiration. Quick thinking, courage under pressure, social intelligence. This girl had everything a frontline manager needed. Choosing her as the head of the Nanyang branch was absolutely the right decision. After the tea house incident, the mood in the carriage shifted. Xiaohi was riding high on confidence, chattering away about stories she'd picked up during her time at the Hall of Flowers. Xiaoyu was quieter than usual, gazing out the window, clearly thinking about what lay ahead. I let them talk while my mind worked on the bigger picture. Nanyang wasn't Qingyuan County. Over 500,000 people, merchants everywhere, powerful families on every corner. Our novelty products alone wouldn't be enough to break in here. I needed connections, real ones, at a level above what Zhou Enhai could offer. His county magistrate title meant nothing in a city like this. 2 more days of travel, and the city walls finally appeared. Towering, endless, twice the height of anything back home. Even before we passed through the gate, the energy of a real metropolis hit us. The line to enter stretched forever. We paid the entry fee and rolled in. The streets were wide, packed, and loud. Shops stacked on top of each other, restaurants, tea houses, pawn shops, banks, signs and banners blanketing every surface. The people here dressed better and walked with the easy confidence of big city dwellers. I found a decent inn, got the girls settled, and went out alone to scout. The competition here was serious. Cosmetic shops were bigger and better stocked, some carrying fashionable styles straight from the capital. Silk shops had fabrics I'd never seen in Qingyuan, some of them imperial tribute goods. To make an impact here, I need to bring my absolute best. I stopped at Wangjiang Tower for tea and intelligence. Same strategy as last time. Order something expensive, sit by the window, and listen. 2 pieces of information caught my ear. First, the prefect's son was marrying a military commander's daughter next month, a major power alliance. Second, and more interesting, a pleasure house called the Drunken Immortal Pavilion had recently gotten a new star performer. Supposedly from the capital, stunningly beautiful, master of every artistic skill. Even the prefect's son had been turned away. You needed to book 3 days in advance just to see her. A top-tier pleasure house was always the fastest shortcut into high society. Rich merchants and powerful officials gathered there like moths to flame. If I wanted to break into Nanyang's elite circles quickly, that was my entry point. I spent 2 days working with a local broker to find the right property. Prefecture prices were 5 or 6 times what I'd paid in Qingyuan, but money wasn't the issue. Location and potential were. I found exactly what I wanted on Vermilion Bird Street, the busiest commercial strip on the east side. A 2-story building directly facing a popular silk shop, right next to a high-end jewelry store. The foot traffic was all wealthy women, our perfect customers. 800 taels. I didn't even try to negotiate. Done. The broker was so pleased he helped me find a small 2-courtyard residence nearby for Xia, he, and Xiaoyu to live in. 300 taels. The entire 1,000 tael startup fund was spent before we'd even started renovating. But every coin was well placed. That afternoon, I brought the girls to see everything. When Xiaoyu laid eyes on that grand 2-story storefront on Vermilion Bird Street, she could barely speak. She stammered and asked if we were really opening here. Scared? I teased. No. I'm thrilled. Her face was burning red. A location this good? We're going to crush it. Xiaoyu stood at the entrance watching elegantly dressed noble women stroll past with their entourages, and something changed behind her eyes. For the first time, I saw not just acceptance, but actual ambition. She was starting to believe she could do this. With the property secured and the girls ready to handle renovations and opening on their own, I didn't rush back to Qingyuan. I had something more important to take care of first. That evening, I put on a fine silk robe, understated but expensive, and headed south alone. My destination, the city's biggest, most exclusive pleasure house, the one everyone at the T Tower had been buzzing about. Time to meet this new star everyone was talking about. Nanyang after dark was a different beast entirely. Lanterns turned the wide streets bright as day, and the south side, the city's famous pleasure district, dripped with the mingled scents of perfume and wine. The Drunken Immortal Pavilion dominated the best spot on the strip. 5 stories tall, carved and painted top to bottom, massive red lanterns flanking a gold-lettered sign. Music and men's laughter spilled out before I even got close. Standing across the street, I had to admit, this place made the Hall of Flowers back in Qingyuan look like a roadside shack. I straightened my robe and walked in. 2 scantily dressed hostesses swarmed me immediately, cooing about how handsome and distinguished I looked. I slipped one a piece of silver and told her to find me the best seat in the house. The main hall was a spectacle, blazing with light, packed wall to wall. A huge central stage had a dozen dancers in thin silk performing for a roaring crowd. Every table was full, men with girls draped over them, drinking and gambling. A painted madam with swaying hips spotted me and swept over, gushing compliments. She seated me on the second floor at a railing-side table with a perfect view of everything below. When she asked what kind of girl I wanted, I played it casual and mentioned I'd heard they had a new star from the capital. Her eyes sparked, then she put on her troubled face. Lu Rongyin, she said. The line to see her stretched to the city gates. But the girl was proud. She only performed once a night at a set time. Only entertained guests she personally chose, and she absolutely did not sell her body. I asked about her background. The madam puffed up with pride. A proper official's daughter, fallen on hard times, master of every refined art, especially the pipa. Anyone who heard her play was left spellbound. I'd heard that story 100 times in places like this. Every top girl claimed noble origins. Still, I'd come to see what the fuss was about. I set a 10-tael silver ingot on the table and asked if that was enough to get me considered for selection. The madam's eyes went round. 10 taels just for a chance to be chosen? She snatched it up, promised I'd be first in line, and hurried off beaming. I poured myself wine and watched the show downstairs. The dancers here were genuinely better than anything at the Hall of Flowers, every one of them polished and graceful. Then the gong struck. The hall fell silent instantly. The music stopped, the crowd froze, every head turned to the stage. The madam appeared under the lights, announced the moment everyone had been waiting for, and introduced the drunken immortal pavilion's crown jewel, Lu Rongyin. The crowd exploded with cheering and whistling. From behind the stage, flanked by 2 attendants, a woman in a white dress emerged carrying a pipa. A thin white veil covered her face, hiding her features, but her figure, her posture, the way she moved told you everything. This wasn't an ordinary pleasure house girl. There was no trace of the usual painted flirtatiousness. What she carried instead was a cold, elevated grace, completely out of place here, like a celestial being who'd wandered into the wrong world by mistake. Even I sat up straighter. This woman was something different. She reached center stage, gave the audience a single elegant bow without speaking, and sat down. She laid the pipa across her lap. The hall went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Just before she began, her gaze drifted upward, toward the second floor, toward me. Through the veil I felt it, cool as water, but with a thread of curiosity running through it. I raised my wine cup in her direction. A silent toast across the crowded hall. She seemed to notice. A slight nod. Then she lowered her eyes, and her pale fingers settled onto the strings. The first notes rang out like jade beads scattering across a plate, and every sound in the hall died instantly. The music was unlike anything I'd heard before. It started gentle, mountain streams, autumn wind, a thread of distant sadness running through it. Then it shifted without warning into something fierce and thundering. Armies charging, steel clashing, a battlefield roaring to life. The pampered young masters downstairs went pale. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. This wasn't pleasure house music. This was a war song. Then it changed again, slow, mournful, heartbreaking. A hero at the end of the road, dreams unfulfilled, everything lost. Half the room had wet eyes by the time the last note faded. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the applause exploded like a thunderstorm. Men shouted for more. She stood, gave one graceful bow, and walked off without a single word. Gone. The crowd protested, but the madam reminded everyone of the rules, 1 song per night. That was it. The hall went back to its noise, but I sat still for a long time. That song had layers no ordinary entertainer could produce. Patriotic fire, military grief, and underneath it all, a bitter, smoldering rage. This woman had lived through something real and terrible. The madam's story about an official's family brought low might actually be true. Whatever happened to her family, it wasn't small. The madam came back fishing for compliments. I told her the performance was good. She bragged about how even the prefect's secretary had sent money. I cut her off and asked if I could see Lu Rongyin now. She hesitated. The girl chose her own visitors after the show, and several wealthy men downstairs were already waiting. A silk merchant, the garrison commander's son. I understood. An auction in all but name. I pulled out a 100-tael banknote and laid it on the table. Just for a meeting and some tea. Was that enough to put me first? Her eyes nearly popped out. She grabbed the note like it might fly away and promised I'd be the first person Rongyin saw tonight. Then she practically sprinted downstairs. I sipped my tea and waited. Crude? Maybe. But money talks in every era. And sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective. A young maid in green came to fetch me shortly after. I followed her down a corridor to a room at the far end of the second floor. Wind chimes tinkled at the door. Inside was nothing like a brothel. Faint sandalwood incense, tasteful furnishings, books, and a guillotine by the window. It looked like a scholar's private study. A woman in white stood at the window with her back to me, her veil removed, long black hair cascading down like a waterfall. When she turned around, I actually stopped breathing for a moment. I'd seen beautiful women. Wanru's gentle grace, Mainyang's seductive charm, Linger's playful sweetness, Xia He's bold fire. But this face was something else entirely, an otherworldly, almost broken kind of beauty, like a cracked porcelain masterpiece. And those eyes, cold as autumn water, bottomless, carrying the weight of stories I couldn't begin to guess. She invited me to sit. Her voice matched her music, cool, precise, with a haunting quality underneath. I gave her my name. She poured tea herself and skipped the small talk completely. That piece I played, breaking the battle formation, you seem to understand it. I told her I'd caught a little of it. I just hadn't expected to hear a song full of war and steel in a place like this. A bitter, self-mocking smile crossed her lips. You're right. Playing that kind of music here is rather out of place. She looked directly at me, those piercing eyes locking onto mine. Mr. Sun, you spent over 100 taels of silver just to come up here and tell me that. Her question was sharp and direct, almost a challenge. Most men would have gotten flustered or changed the subject. But I'm not most men. I told her I wasn't here just for small talk. I was curious how a woman who could play a battle anthem like Breaking the Formation had ended up in a pleasure house. She stiffened for just a moment. Something dark flashed through those cold eyes. Pain, hatred, then vanished behind her mask. That's none of your concern, she said, even colder than before. I agreed. Then I shifted direction. I told her the song clearly had no official name yet, and if I had to guess, she called it Breaking the Formation, because it was full of war, unfulfilled ambition, and the sorrow of a hero who'd lost everything. She froze. She'd never told anyone the name. She asked how I knew. I guessed, I said simply. The silence that followed was heavy. She studied me like she was seeing me for the first time. She'd met countless rich men and poets in this place, some throwing money to possess her, others showing off their learning to impress her. But nobody had ever cut straight to the hidden heart of her music like that. I wasn't performing sophistication. I'd actually understood. She called me a kindred spirit, her voice softer, the distance between us shrinking. I waved that off. I told her I was just a rough man who didn't know much about music theory. But I could tell she didn't belong here. She laughed bitterly. Where else could she go? A helpless woman in a cruel world. What choice did she have besides selling her beauty and talent? You could come with me, I said. Her teacup jerked. Hot liquid splashed on her hand, but she didn't notice. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I repeated it calmly. I'd buy her freedom and take her away. No more fake smiles for men she despised. No more playing songs that went against her heart. The room went completely silent. She'd heard redemption offers before, dozens of them. But those men all looked at her with hunger and ownership. They wanted to move their pretty toy from one cage to another. My eyes were different, and she could feel it. I'd said, come with me, not, I want you. One word apart, worlds of difference. She asked why. We were strangers. Why would I help her? I told her I liked her music. And I thought she was smart. I happened to need smart people around me. Then I pushed deeper. I told her plainly that her family fallen on hard times story was more than a simple demotion. For a capital official's daughter to end up in a provincial brothel, her family must have been destroyed, accused of something carrying the death penalty. Her face went white as paper. Her hands clenched her dress under the table until her knuckles turned bone white. This was her deepest wound, the one she never let anyone touch. She asked who I really was, voice shaking. Just a merchant, I said. A merchant who found her very interesting. I told her I didn't care about her past. I cared about her future. That battle song she played wasn't just about mourning. It was about revenge. She wanted to clear her family's name. Every word I spoke was a scalpel cutting through the armor she'd built around herself. Her walls came crashing down. Can you help me? She whispered. No, I said. I watched hope drain from her face. But you can help yourself, I explained. If she followed me, I'd give her a platform. Access to people she could never reach from a brothel. Wealth and influence she'd never dared imagine. Whether she could use those tools to achieve her goals, that was up to her own ability. The words hit her like a window being thrown open in a pitch-dark room. She'd dreamed of revenge, but never had any path to it. Now I was offering one, slim, uncertain, but real. She asked why she should trust me. You don't have a choice, I said. The truth was brutal but honest. She could stay here, play her songs, and eventually be bought by some man she hated, spending the rest of her life in wasted misery. Or she could gamble on me. If she lost, she'd be right back where she started. But if she won, her heart was pounding. I could see it in the pulse at her throat. She stood up, walked to me, and did something I hadn't expected. She knelt and pressed her forehead to the floor in the deepest bow of loyalty. Lu Rongyin pledges to follow you, sir. To the death. Her kneeling caught me off guard. I'd expected to need more persuasion with a woman this proud, but she'd made up her mind faster than I anticipated. I didn't help her up right away. I told her following me wouldn't mean living as a pampered lady. There'd be no easy luxury. She looked up with fire in her eyes. Real fire, not the performing kind. She said as long as she could avenge her family and clear their name, she'd follow me through anything. I nodded and pulled her to her feet. Her arm was thin and trembling under my hand. Starting today, you're no longer the drunken immortal pavilion's Lu Rongyin, I told her. Your past ends here. Her eyes went red. She thanked me for giving her a second life. I told her to save the gratitude. Getting out of this place wouldn't be simple. That madam treated her as a money tree and wouldn't let go easily. Rongyin confirmed it. Previous suitors had tried to buy her freedom, but the asking price was so outrageous they all gave up. How much? I asked. 3,000 taels. 3,000. Enough to buy a 5-courtyard mansion in the best part of the city. An absurd sum for one person. I laughed. 3,000? I was worried she'd price you too low. That would have been insulting. Rongyin stared at me like I'd lost my mind. 3,000 taels, and I was treating it like pocket change. I told her to wait and walked downstairs to the madam's office. She was counting the night's take, all smiles when she saw me. I didn't waste time. Name your price. I'm taking Lu Rongyin. Her smile froze. She launched into her rehearsed speech. How much she'd invested bringing Rongyin from the capital, the training costs, the lost revenue from her star attraction leaving. The usual performance. I cut her off. How much? She held up 3 fingers. 3,000 taels. Not a coin less. She expected me to choke on that number. I reached into my robe, pulled out 3 thick stacks of bank notes, and laid them side by side on her account book. 3,000. Count it. Her brain stopped working. She gaped at the money like it had appeared from thin air. She'd prepared an entire negotiation strategy, planned to haggle, planned to settle around 2,500 and feel clever about it. I hadn't bargained at all. Didn't even hesitate. Not enough? I reached for my robe again. Enough. More than enough. She lunged forward and swept all 3 stacks into her arms like a mother hen protecting her eggs. Her face was twisted with the effort of processing this much joy at once. She scrambled to a locked cabinet, pulled out a yellowed contract, Rongyin's ownership papers, and handed it over with trembling hands, babbling that Rongyin was mine now. No connection to the pavilion ever again. I took the contract, looked at it once. Then I held it over the candle on the desk. The paper caught fire and curled into ash in seconds. The madam's mouth fell open. What are you doing? I said I wanted a smart person, not a slave. I brushed the ash off my hands and walked out, leaving her standing there clutching 3,000 taels, looking like she'd dreamed the whole thing. Back in Rongyin's room, she was pacing anxiously. She rushed toward me the moment I appeared. What happened? I said nothing. I just opened my palm and showed her what was in it. A small pile of gray ash. She looked at it, confused for a second. Then understanding hit her. That was her contract. Her chains. The document that had made her property. And I'd burned it. Something broke open inside her. Warmth flooded her face. Her composure shattered, and tears poured from those cold, guarded eyes. From now on, I said quietly, you're free. She covered her mouth, sank to the floor, and wept. Not the controlled, dignified tears of a performer, but the raw, shaking sobs of someone who'd just been told they were human again. I brought Lu Rongyin back to the small 2-courtyard house we just bought in the city. Xiaohi and Xiaoyu had already cleaned the place up with 4 helpers. When Xiaohi saw me walk in with such a beautiful woman, I could tell she was sizing her up. I introduced Lu Rongyin to them both. Xiaohi runs the shop in Nanyang, and Xiaoyu keeps the books. Lu Rongyin greeted them politely, calling them older sisters. Xiaohi put on a warm smile right away, grabbing Lu Rongyin's hands and praising her looks. I knew Xiaohi well enough to guess what was going on in her head, but she's smart. She plays her role perfectly. I told Lu Rongyin to rest in the best room we'd prepared, then handed Xiaohi 500 taels in banknotes. I told her to buy whatever the house needed, hire servants through an agent, maids, a cook, a housekeeper, 2 guards, and get this household running properly. Her eyes lit up. Giving her control over the money and staffing was the surest way to keep her motivated. After that, I left to check the black market for interesting goods and prepare the first batch of stock for our new shop. While I was gone, Xiaohi got right to work. She split the money with Xiaoyu for bookkeeping, settled Lu Rongyin into her room, and then headed to the biggest hiring agency in town. Lu Rongyin surprised Xiaohi by volunteering to come along instead of sitting around. At the agency, Xiaohi handled everything like a seasoned boss, questioning each candidate sharply, weeding out the fakers, negotiating wages, signing contracts. By the end of the afternoon, she'd hired a full staff, an experienced housekeeper, a cook who specializes in Suzhou cuisine, 2 older maids, for junior maids, and 2 strong guards. When the 2 of them got back to the house at dusk, I was already there waiting. The warehouse door was open, and inside sat a big cart covered in oilcloth. The first shipment for our shop had arrived. Xiaohi and Lu Rongyin hurried over to the warehouse, curious about the goods. Xiaohi asked how I got supplies so fast. She knew shipping from the county would take days. I just smiled and told them I have my own ways. I jumped onto the cart and pulled off the oilcloth. Underneath were dozens of wooden crates stacked neatly. I opened the first one. Both women gasped. Inside were beautifully crafted round fans, silk faces embroidered with gold and silver thread showing birds and flowers, handles made from expensive woods like rosewood, some even set with small pearls and gems. Xiaohi couldn't stop staring. Even Lu Rongyin, who grew up around luxury as a former noble's daughter, was impressed by the designs, classic yet fresh, nothing like what's sold anywhere else. I kept opening boxes. Jewelry, silver hairpins with blue enamel butterflies, jade earrings carved like water drops, bracelets of colorful glass beads. Then fragrant balms with light, elegant scents, uniquely shaped combs and mirrors with handles that fit perfectly in your hand, little woven cord necklaces with tiny bells or jade pendants. Xiaohi's voice was shaking with excitement. She asked if all of this was for our shop. I said of course. Then she noticed something missing. No snow soap or 100 Flowers fragrance. Those were our best sellers back in the county, and on the black market here in the city, a single bar of snow soap was going for 30 taels. I had my excuse ready. I told her the city is more complicated than the county. If we sell those here, our supplier back in Qingyuan might get upset and cut us off. Besides, a new shop needs new products. We want the wealthy ladies here to know we always have things they've never seen before. Xiaohi bought it. The real reason, though, was Madame Xiang from the Chuanfeng house. I'd given her exclusive selling rights for the soap and fragrance to get my foot in the door early on. It was just a verbal deal, and I'd already stopped supplying her. But if she found out I opened a shop in the same city selling the same stuff, that woman would cause serious trouble. Better to avoid the headache. My system has plenty of other good products anyway. I told them to move everything into storage. Tomorrow they'd sort and catalog it all. The shop renovation needed to start too. I wanted to be open for business in 3 days. Xiaohi jumped right on it, rallying the new housekeeper and guards to start unloading. Lu Rongyin tried to help too, but I stopped her. I picked up one of the lotus fans and put it in her hand, then took a blue butterfly hairpin and placed it in her hair myself. I stepped back and looked at her. I told her she didn't need to do anything. Just be beautiful, and that was enough. Her face turned red. She looked down at the fan, and I could tell she was flustered. Then she noticed something. 2 tiny characters carved at the very bottom of the fan handle. The fan had her name carved on it. Lu Rongyin noticed, and I could see the surprise in her eyes. But I didn't give her time to dwell on it. I steered the conversation to business. I told her these goods were new and impressive, but the wealthy women in the city have seen plenty of fine things. We needed a way to make them want to spend their money here. I was testing her, and she knew it. She thought for a moment, then spoke up. She said our shop shouldn't be like every other store with everything laid out for anyone to browse. The first floor should have affordable but eye-catching small items to draw people in and build our reputation. But the real treasures, the fans, jewelry, premium goods, should go on the second floor, accessible only to select customers. Then she proposed a membership system. Customers who spend 100 taels get a silver card with a 5% discount. 500 taels earns a gold card, 10% off, plus the ability to pre-order special items. 1,000 taels gets a diamond card, 20% off and access to private custom services. Xiaohi overheard and came over, asking what private custom meant. Lu Rongyin explained. Diamond members could request custom fan designs with their own patterns or names, or get a unique fragrance blended just for them. The idea was to make each customer feel like she was getting something truly one of a kind. Xiaohi slapped her thigh in excitement. She was right. Those wealthy ladies don't care about spending more, they care about exclusivity. I could see Xiaohi's whole opinion of Lu Rongyin's shift in that moment, from pretty face to money-making genius. I was impressed too. I gave Lu Rongyin the platform, and she immediately showed what she could do. Her noble upbringing gave her an understanding of high society that Xiaohi, for all her street smarts, simply didn't have. I told Lu Rongyin the plan was approved and asked her to name the shop. She thought briefly and suggested Linlang Pavilion, meaning a dazzling collection of treasures with an elegant feminine ring to it. I liked it and decided on the spot. Then I made the management structure clear. Xiaohi stays as head manager running overall operations. Lu Rongyin would be in charge of the VIP second floor and the custom services. One handles the outside, the other the inside. They complement each other. Xiaohi felt a little sting at sharing power, but she quickly realized Lu Rongyin's ideas were genuinely good, and she still held the top title. She agreed to cooperate. Lu Rongyin was grateful I trusted her with real responsibility. This was exactly what I wanted. Xiaohi is sharp and great at execution. Lu Rongyin has vision and creativity. Together they cover each other's weaknesses. And with both of them needing me as the final decision maker, the balance of power stays in my hands. I told them to start renovations tomorrow and have the shop, Linlang Pavilion, open in 3 days. They both answered with fire in their eyes. I left them to it and quietly headed back to the inn. A message had arrived from Sun Danyan back in Qingyuan County. After we broke through the toughest resistance at Li Family Village, the land survey work was going very smoothly. 3 days later, Linlang Pavilion opened, and it was even bigger than I expected. Xiaohi and the new maids were swamped on the first floor. The small accessories, hairpins, bracelets, fragrant bombs, flew off the shelves almost instantly. The woven necklaces with little bells were something the city girls had never seen, and they couldn't get enough. Upstairs was Lu Rongyin's domain. She wore a simple, elegant dress with the butterfly hairpin I'd given her, looking refined and untouchable. The wealthy ladies who came up by invitation took one look at her and already believed in what we were selling. Linlang Pavilion wasn't just a shop, it was a statement of taste. She didn't push products like a regular shopkeeper. She sat quietly, offering the occasional comment about embroidery techniques or suggesting which piece matched a customer's personality. Every word hit the mark. She'd steer a lady away from a flashy gold hairpin toward a subtle jade one that better suited her, or recommend the perfect bracelet to complement an outfit. These picky women were won over fast. When she introduced the private custom service and showed off her own personalized fan, 3 of the most prominent ladies in the city each put down 1,000 taels on the spot to become our first diamond members. That evening, Xiaohi burst into my study with the account book. In 1 day, we'd taken in 1,320 taels. After costs, nearly 800 in pure profit. She was shaking with excitement. Her best day back in the county never came close. I flipped through the numbers calmly. The money wasn't what I was focused on. I asked about Lu Rongyin. Xiaohi told me she was upstairs working on custom designs for the clients, personally sketching patterns and planning to oversee the embroiderers herself. Even Xiaohi sounded genuinely impressed now. I told her to make sure Lu Rongyin rested soon, then sat alone in my study thinking. This woman was worth far more than the 3,000 taels I'd spent. She understood women's hearts and knew how to turn that understanding into silver. Of our success today, Xiaohe's execution was 3 parts, my goods were 3 parts, but Lu Rongyin alone was 4, the most critical 4. Things in the city were on track. Word from Sun Danyan said the land survey back in the county was nearly finished. I needed to go back soon. But before that, there was something to settle. I walked through the quiet courtyard toward Lu Rongyin's room. My mind was calm. Saving her, freeing her, giving her a career, all of that was an investment. Now it was time to collect a little interest. I never pretended to be some noble gentleman. I'm a businessman who understands costs and returns. She's smart enough to understand that too. Nothing in this world is free. Her lamp was still on.